When relatives arrived at David O'Hearn's home, they made a gruesome discovery. The 60-year-old had been murdered. Police were about to embark on an investigation that would take many turns, and one most unexpected twist.
It was a scene that I'd never encountered in all my years in the police. There was a body of a male laying on his back. He'd been decapitated. There was a hand sitting on a lounge, and it appeared that he'd been completely disemboweled, and the intestines and that were laying on a silver tray that was alongside the body.
On one of the walls there was a pentagram with the word Satan beside it. Another wall had an inverted cross. And on a mirror above a side table, the word Satan had been written also.
All these drawings appeared to have been drawn in the victim's blood.
There were a large number of items on the floor around the body. There were 4 knives, a small metal saw, a razor blade, as well as a corkscrew. These items all had blood on them, so it was obvious they'd been used during the mutilation of the victim. But as to in what order that had taken place, we weren't able to tell at that time.
It was clear to me at the crime scene of David O'Hearn that the mutilation injuries happened after death, because there was really very little blood associated with those injuries.
Also located near to where the body was found resting was a crystal decanter which had a significant amount of blood staining.
There was a large amount of blood splatter in the room, but there was some directional blood splatter which was emanating from the head area of the victim. This blood splatter was extremely low level. It was coming from a source just above ground level, which indicated that a lot of the injuries to the victim's head had been occasioned whilst the victim was actually lying on the ground.
We moved further into the unit and we found the decapitated head that was sitting in the sink.
And there were some black gloves found beside the sink. They were moist and they were turned inside out, which suggested to me that the gloves were taken off at the completion of the whole incident.
The fingerless exercise gloves meant that there could be fingerprints within the flat, or hopefully on what looked to be the murder weapon.
There was evidence that somebody had ransacked his drawers looking for what appeared to be searching for an item of property. There was personal effects strewn out all over the top of David's bed.
We looked at robbery as a motive, but it just seemed too severe for a robbery, and the injuries in that Mr. O'Hearn suffered was far beyond, say, someone torturing someone to divulge the location of valuables. I think my initial thought was that this crime had been carried out by someone with a great deal of anger. There just seemed to be no pattern or rhyme or reason to it. For someone to kill someone and then go to this extent of the decapitation and the disemboweling.
To locals around Dapto, Dave O'Hearn was the friendly face behind the counter of the corner store. That's why they can't understand how anyone could kill him, especially in such a horrible way.
I just can't imagine him being involved in anything that would warrant what he went through.
In an investigation like this, one team will always be assigned to background the victim. It's important for us to find out who his associates are and who he's had dealings with, where he goes, where he comes from, everything about him.
David was a quiet person. He kept to himself a lot, but as a brother, he was very, very, very thoughtful and decent. He wasn't perfect, but he was a really good bloke. David had the corner shop for, I think, 2 years. Okay. He was always good for a loan, and I think he liked to help people that he thought needed a hand. We didn't know of anybody that could hate him that much. He just wasn't a person you could hate.
When David O'Hearn's body was found, the state of his clothing gave police a potential clue to the murder.
The fact that Mr. O'Hearn's trousers and everything were down around his ankles suggested it may have been a homosexual hate crime, but whilst there may have been some indication of homosexuality with him, all his relationships, I think we found over the period of time, in his 60 years, there may have been 3 relationships.
My family deny that he might have been a homosexual, but I'm sure he was. But in a very quiet, minded his own business sort of a way. He wasn't out there with it. He was very, very quiet.
The fact that David didn't have any enemies suggested to us that the person that had committed the offence was a stranger to David. And that being the case, it was going to be that much more difficult to identify who the killer was.
But their first clue as to who that stranger might be would come from the bizarre satanic drawings written in David's own blood on his lounge room walls. 63-year-old David O'Hearn was dead. Police, neighbours and his relatives had no clues as to why the popular shopkeeper had been so brutally murdered. Detectives hoped that his last known movements would give them a clue.
He was a creature of habit. He would open his shop at certain times and close it at certain times. So we were able to identify roughly a closing time of the shop.
His normal closing time was around 5 o'clock. In his car we found some groceries, and in the bags was a docket from one of the supermarkets at Dapto that indicated that he'd been through the checkout around about 5:30.
On top of that, we did examine CCTV footage that was maintained by the shopping centre, and we were able to confirm that it was David that actually paid for the goods.
And just as he was leaving the shop, he ran into one of Mum's nurses and she said, "Oh, hello, David. When you're coming to see Mum?" He said, "Oh, I'll be there tomorrow. Give her my love and say I'll be there at lunchtime with the sandwich." And she was the last person that David spoke to, as far as we know.
And they were able to give us some indication about his state of mind, which said that he was happy and quite okay. Didn't appear to be under threat from any person or being followed by anyone.
The fact that his vehicle was located in the garage and still had bags of perishable and non-perishable items suggested to police that the meeting with the offender occurred shortly after parking the car in the garage.
The fact that there was no sign of entry or forced entry on his house would indicate that he either knew the person and let them in, or his door was unlocked and the person had just walked in unannounced.
The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was due to severe blunt force head injury caused by some blunt object. The head injuries were all at the back of the head, so clearly Mr. O'Hearn was not facing his attacker at the time these blows were rained down upon him. So to that extent, I think it was quite a surprise attack.
Mr. O'Hearn had a fractured skull and there was hair and blood on the decanter that was consistent with the wound that he'd suffered. So therefore the decanter turned out to be the murder weapon.
The bloody decanter and its stopper were now being examined in the fingerprint laboratory.
The wine decanter was placed in a superglue chamber to be tested for any possible fingerprints. The superglue vaporises and falls onto the surface, highlighting any fingerprints that appear on the surface in a white visible matter.
The fingerprints on that particular item suggested to the investigation team that the offender actually had touched the lid of that decanter. So the next step was to try to identify who those prints belonged to.
But when the one identifiable fingerprint on the stopper was put into the police database, there was no match.
To an investigation team, that meant that the offender hadn't been charged or certainly didn't have his fingerprints on file.
The tools that had been used to decapitate David after his death were also subjected to fingerprint examination. But while no fingerprints were identified, the tools were giving the detectives a small lead.
We looked in the garage and in the cupboards in the kitchen area, and we subsequently found similar tools in the cupboard directly above the fridge area. Obviously, to me, it was difficult to maintain eyesight of it, and actually had to stand on my tippy toes and occasionally hop up to see these tools, where it was quite simple for my outsider to eyeball these tools. So to me, that suggested that the offender was floating around the height of about 6 foot tall. We were able to show that there were similar knives in David's kitchen. We found some tools which are consistent with the tools that we found on the carpet. It suggests to me that the offender went there unarmed.
The satanic drawings scrawled in blood on the walls of the crime scene had also provided police with another crucial lead, an indication of the killer's identity.
A man found murdered in his home on the south coast may have been the victim of a satanic cult. The macabre case just south of Wollongong has detectives baffled.
One of the main lines of inquiries was to identify people that lived in the area that had an interest in satanic activity.
We had received some information relating to a fellow called Schreiber, and he's leaning towards the occult and satanic areas. We also found in our inquiry that Schreiber lived only a couple of doors down from Ahern, so he became a very, very strong person of interest.
Police believe the killing was some sort of a ritual, the work of devil worshippers.
Detective Sergeant Raymond, this is Detective Sergeant
It
Wilkins.
was important to speak to Keith Schreiber. Police went to the address up the road from David O'Hearn. Subsequently spoke to Keith's flatmate. Keith wasn't at home, but they were invited to inspect Keith's room, and it was at that time that they identified a number of hand sketches which was consistent with the crime scene.
In his bedroom they found a number of drawings that depicted headless bodies and disembowelment. And it was as a result of that that Schreiber became a very, very strong suspect.
The instant thought that came to my mind was that Keith, if not directly involved in the murder, had some connection to it. There were just too many close similarities between the drawings that we identified and that which was identified in the crime scene. It was important that we locate Keith and commit him to a version which would account for his movements on the night.
You Keith Schreiber? Yeah?
Schreiber was located at his place of employment, which was a fish market, and of all things he was a filleter.
Where were you last Friday? Working.
We obtained his version of events. He gave us the alibi that he was staying with his employer for the evening and actually had been sleeping on the floor as they had to make an early start to go to the Sydney fish markets. Police subsequently spoke to his employer, who confirmed the fact that Keith had spent the night on his lounge room floor.
The detective's only lead had vanished, and they were back to square one. Worse still, another murder had just occurred, and the similarities to the O'Hearn crime scene could not be ignored. David O'Hearn was found murdered in his flat. He had been mutilated and dismembered. Now, only 2 weeks later, and only a kilometre away, another murder was occupying the team of detectives. A murder that had eerie similarities to the first.
Former MP and alleged pedophile Frank Arkell murdered in his Wollongong home. His killer is being hunted by the same team of detectives investigating the decapitation murder of another man at nearby Albion Park Rail 2 weeks ago.
If you can picture the crime scene, as you're looking in the front doors of the granny flat, the glass doors had opened up, and then immediately confronting you straight at the door was a double bed. And over beyond the double bed lay Frank's body.
He wasn't easily identifiable at that stage due to the amount of blood that covered his face. It was obvious that he'd suffered substantial injury to his head.
You could see that there was a broken lampshade lying next to the body that had been used in the attack. It was the ferocity of the attack had broken it.
I think Mr. Arkell died as a result predominantly of head injury, but there was also a suggestion based on the presence of a cord around the neck and some marks on the neck that he may also have been strangled. Those injuries, and collectively they were over 40, would have taken some time to inflict.
Like the murder of David O'Hearn, the offender had used whatever was on hand to kill his victim.
The pattern of injuries was quite similar with both men. The bed lamp that I think was used on Frank Arkell and the wine decanter on Mr. O'Hearn, they were both weapons of opportunity in that they were already at the scene.
Likewise, the mutilation to the body had occurred post-death.
When I examined the face of Frank Arkell, I noted it was an unusual and very sadistic characteristic that 3 tie pins had been inserted into his face. One had been sunk deeply into his cheek, whilst another 2 were inserted, one in each eye.
Quite similar post-mortem mutilation and effects done to the body made me think that possibly there was one perpetrator involved in both of those murders.
As police searched the flat for any trace the killer had left behind, they found a plastic lunchbox full of tie pins.
Given that the victim had been assaulted with a number of tie pins, it was quite feasible that the offender may well have handled this item.
The lunchbox, along with the glass sliding door, the only entry to the flat, were removed and sent for fingerprint analysis. Both yielded results. Yet neither print matched any known offender in the police database, nor did they match the fingerprint at the O'Hearn crime scene.
The fact that they don't match does not suggest they didn't come from the same hand or from the same offender. It just suggests that they came from a different part of the hand.
To us, we looked at the cases as being linked, and our obvious starting point of evidence is to try and identify these fingerprints, and of course we come up blank, primarily because the fingerprints weren't on record, which is a bit scary when you think about it. A person who had no criminal record all of a sudden leaping into murder.
The only motive police had to work with for the murder of Frank Arkell was revenge. This was a crime scene that suggested great hatred, and Frank Arkell had recently been accused of paedophilia.
There's one thing I'm totally opposed, is young people being interfered with by older people.
13 months ago, the former Lord Mayor was arrested and charged with 29 sex offences involving boys and men. He was due to stand trial in September on 4 of the charges.
Police are keeping a close eye on suspected pederasts living in the area, just in case. Detectives are questioning some of Frank Arkell's victims as part of their investigation.
Lots of people were interviewed and lots of statements were taken from people who had made allegations that Frank had sexually assaulted them. But they were all spoken to at length and their alibis were very good. We were satisfied that they, as individuals, had not caused Frank's death.
There was a possibility that their killer was someone that didn't know Frank, and it was more of just a thrill killer. And then, of course, you couple with what's happened with David O'Hearn. Are they linked? What is the commonalities between the two? Are Frank and David O'Hearn known to each other?
The only link was that each was homosexual, but that didn't stop the media carelessly linking the two in other ways.
Police have set up a new task force to investigate Mr. Arkell's murder. It will work closely with another team looking into the violent death of David O'Hearn. It's thought both men were involved in a child sex network. Frank Arkell was facing multiple sex charges, accused of drugging young men, then forcing them to have sex with him. It's believed he was well acquainted with 60-year-old David O'Hearn, who was found murdered in his Wollongong townhouse 2 weeks ago.
They didn't appear to have facts. It seemed to be that they were just making it up. And that hurts the family the most. The way that the media portrayed David as this sick person, this person that would be involved with a sick crime, like with paedophilia, any of that. That just never, ever entered our heads because he just wasn't that sort of person.
Let me say that when we looked into David's background, we certainly dug that deep into his background that we knew just about everything about that man. That was an area that could be sort of ruled out.
The fact remained, 2 men were dead within 2 weeks of each other. The fear was whether the killer would strike again, or whether he had killed before and it had gone unnoticed.
We started to look at a lot of homosexual murders. We started to delve into ones that are unsolved as well, because you've got David and Frank. We certainly looked at maybe there's a homosexual angle there somewhere.
The brutal murders of two Wollongong men, David O'Hearn and Frank Arkell, had police concerned there was a serial killer on the loose. The question was, had the offender possibly killed before?
Where do you start looking for somebody that's got common links? Do you look beyond the Wollongong area, which we did? We started to look at a lot of homosexual murders. We started to delve into ones that are unsolved as well, because you've got David and Frank. We certainly looked at maybe there's a homosexual angle there somewhere.
It's believed the killer, who used a lamp to bash Mr Arkell, could also be responsible for two other murders, shopkeeper David O'Hearn at nearby Albion Park Rail and convicted pederast Trevor Parkin at Glebe.
Trevor Parkin had been subjected to a very brutal killing. He'd been beaten about the head and mutilated.
The similarities to the David O'Hearn crime scene were obvious.
It appeared at both crime scenes that they died as a result of blunt force trauma to the head, and there was mutilation to the genitals of both victims.
But Trevor Parkin's murder had occurred 6 months before and was 80 kilometres away from those in Wollongong.
So as an investigator, you're looking at a wide area and you just wonder, where does the killer live? Because the assumption is that the killer must live within a close proximity to where the offence occurred. But here we are, we've got an hour and a half between two crime scenes, and it could be anywhere.
But the geographical difference was soon overlooked. What police believed they had found on this railway station not only linked the cities, but the crimes.
Some of Trevor Parkin's property that was stolen from his flat at the time was found on a train at Waterfall railway station. And Waterfall is a suburb that's on that rail line between Sydney and Wollongong. It's only a couple of stops away from Wollongong itself. So to have property found that was stolen from Trevor Parkin's flat, found directly on the southern line where these other two murders occurred, is significant. The assumption we had to make was that the killer must live on the south coast, live down in the Wollongong area.
The three investigations were kept separate at that stage because we didn't know whether we were dealing with one person, whether we were dealing with three persons.
A significant find to us from Trevor Parkin's flat at Glebe was a whole handprint on the wall in blood, which is very unusual to find, and it's something that we certainly valued tremendously.
But that handprint could not be matched to any on file, nor its fingerprint to those at the O'Hearn or Arkell crime scenes.
We've got at least a hand in one of the scenes. Surely that fingerprint must match to the others. But when it's looked at, you must have the same digit on each of the scenes. So the handprint that was found in blood didn't match up with the prints that we found on the decanter and or the door of Frank Arkell.
You've got to realise that you've got 8 fingers and 2 thumbs, and unless the full set of prints are available, never in a million years are you ever going to match those two together unless you have the 2 full sets of prints to compare.
But while the police had no fingerprints to help them discover who the offender was, they had found solid evidence at Arkell's residence that they were now chasing up.
We had found a pair of Nike tracksuit pants that were found turned inside out, so in a position as though they had been taken off and taken off in a hurry and left on the floor, and a pair of Colorado boots, those type that were very popular at that time.
The tracksuit pants were a Nike brand with a very thick stripe, and they were very, very much against what Frank would wear. The Colorado boots were size 9.5 and he wore size 7, so it was obvious to us that the clothes had been discarded by the killer.
Detectives knew the killer had used weapons found at the crime scene to kill his victim, and chances were he'd also taken some of Arkell's clothing.
Up inside the main house, I remember seeing a maroon-coloured tracksuit top and a maroon-coloured bottom. I think I saw a black top as well, and then we just couldn't find the black pants to it. So then you start to look around the house to see if you've got matching items of clothing. Does a tracksuit top fit with a tracksuit bottom? And we're able to look up into the main house itself and look through the clothing with the help of the housekeeper. We We had the top, but we were missing a pair of tracksuit pants. So to us, the killer's left his clothes behind that were bloodstained and then left in a pair of Frank's tracksuit pants. If we get to an arrest stage, our hope is we're going to find another item from Frank's house, another link to the chain within the possession of the killer.
But they needed to find the killer first. And the boots were providing a good lead.
We really seized upon the opportunity that the offender had given us to have in our own possession his actual shoes. So that was a very exciting thing for a strike force to have.
We followed the trail of Colorado boots back to the manufacturers. We were able to look at the batch numbers, the brand numbers, where they were distributed. There wasn't anything we didn't know about Colorado boots.
We identified one particular shop in the area of Wollongong. So we went to the shop, we asked for all their sales records of Colorado boots, and we ended up with, I think it was 6 credit card slips.
The task then for police was to track down those 6 customers, one of which could potentially be their killer.
Majority of the time the people still had the boots. On some occasions they're actually wearing them when police spoke with them. We were quickly able to eliminate those 6 people from the inquiry with those Colorado boots. So it got to a point where the inquiries with the people didn't advance us any further.
It was more than likely the boots had been a cash purchase, and with no better luck with the track pants, the police hoped the public might give them a lead.
Police say clothing dumped near the mutilated body of alleged sex offender Frank Arkell has given them vital clues to his killer.
These are the clothes worn by Frank Arkell's killer. A pair of blood-spattered tracksuit pants, socks and hiking boots found discarded in the granny flat where Mr Arkell was murdered.
We're obviously anxious to speak to anyone that's recognises these items of clothing or in fact seen anybody wearing those clothes in the area.
But while no leads came from the clothes that night,
I saw a red car leaving
a call did come into Crime Stoppers about a car leaving Frank Arkell's house on the night he was murdered.
The possibility was that this could have been the killer leaving the house, and it's something we had to explore. We couldn't leave it undone.
Police were desperate to find the person who had likely killed 2 men in 2 weeks, and another 6 months before, but they were getting nowhere.
It's easy on the TV, they do it overnight, but in real life it doesn't happen that way. It takes a lot of work to try and get these things done to get results. It just doesn't happen overnight.
Hello, Crime Stoppers?
But detectives were hoping a call that had just come in would speed up the process.
We followed that call up, which led us to speak to the man. It said he saw a red Nissan Skyline car leave the vicinity of either Frank Arkell's or the neighbour's house. He was driving home past the area. He thought that he saw a car come out of a driveway, whether it was Frank's driveway or the next door neighbour's driveway. At 3 o'clock in the morning, it fits within our estimated time of death. This could have been the killer leaving the house, and it's something we had to explore.
This is the car police, detectives and investigators from Task Force Lincoln have been searching for. The vehicle, smashed and stripped, was uncovered by police in bushland at Mount Ousley on Sunday. A similar vehicle was seen in the vicinity of Mr Arkell's Reserve Street home at 2:30 a.m. the next day.
But police needed to confirm whether this really was the car that their witness had seen. And after tracking him down, they interviewed him in an unconventional way. Hypnosis.
I want you to close your eyes over and go into a deep sound hypnotic sleep.
Hypnotism, like everything else, is not an exact science, and the challenge is as to what he's going to recall that he hasn't told you before.
There was high hopes that the witness would remember the registration number, even a part of it would help.
Was there 1 or 2 persons in the car, which direction the car went? Are you able to narrow down any identifying marks on the car? The hypnosis was able to confirm, yes, it was a red Nissan Skyline that he saw, and I think he was able to establish that it was within the driveway of Frank Arkell. Beyond that, there was a 1-person driving, a male by themselves in the car, and he was able to provide a description, and based on that description, a sketch artist helped prepare a composite picture of the type of person that we're looking for.
The computer-enhanced image compiled after hypnosis was used on a witness who spotted a red sedan near Mr. Arkell's home the night of his murder.
Well, our witness believes that that's about 75% likeness of the person that he saw.
During the examination of the red Nissan Skyline, a number of items were examined and subjected to laboratory analysis and examination. Unfortunately, they didn't provide any link between this vehicle and the crime.
So the strike force has to pick themselves up again and look at what they've got left and follow those other leads.
The strongest lead was the killer's clothes found at Frank Arkell's flat. Now, 3 months after their discovery, they were paying dividends.
One of the calls was from an ex-girlfriend of a person that she said used to regularly wear a similar Nike tracksuit and similar Colorado boots, but no longer in fact wore them. The girlfriend had also told us that when she had spoken to her boyfriend about him not wearing the clothing anymore, that he became agitated. He didn't want to tell her any detail about that.
As well as being very sheepish about the location of the boots and the tracksuit pants, she noticed that the boyfriend had developed an interest in the murders itself and started to keep paper clippings and started to talk about it. So here we are, we've got a person that owns not just the boots, not just the tracksuit pants, owns both. And they vanished, for want of a better word, shortly after the death of Frank Arkell. So you're starting to look at something that's a very promising lead.
The woman had given us the name of her ex-boyfriend as being Mark Van Crevel.
Mark was currently unemployed, but had commuted to Sydney for work in the past.
We decided to watch his movements, and we watched them very closely and constantly from that period of time. If he was our murderer, we had to protect the community from him striking out again, but we didn't have enough to arrest him.
During the surveillance operation, our suspect was seen in the company of some of his friends, including Keith Schreiber.
Keith Schreiber was the initial suspect in the David O'Hearn murder investigation.
Coincidentally and very relevant is the fact that Keith Schreiber lived in the same street as David O'Hearn, and that Mark Van Crevel lived for good periods of time with Keith Schreiber in that house.
Police now realised when they went in search of Schreiber, the door to his flat was opened by Mark Van Crevel. As luck would have it, Van Crevel was taken to the police station at that time.
He just flew right under the radar. He was simply just an alibi witness, so as a result, a typed interview was taken from Mark Van Crevel, accounting for Keith's movements.
I told you that I intended asking you further questions about
As is the case with all people that are interviewed in any homicide investigation, a hard copy of the interview is made. Both the person taking part in the interview and police sign it, and the document's filed in a plastic sleeve and used for future reference in the investigation.
An idea was put forward that we should in fact fingerprint the statement that he had provided as an alibi witness to Keith Schreiber.
In order to obtain fingerprints from a piece of paper, the exhibit is placed in a liquid chemical which is called anhydride. This chemical reacts with the amino acids of the fingerprint that is on the paper. The fingerprint develops and becomes visible by a purple stain.
That purple stain revealed a clear set of fingerprints, and they matched the O'Hearn and Arkell murder scenes.
Finally, we've got this exciting bit of evidence that we've identified fingerprints on that document linking him to both crimes.
And while there was little doubt those fingerprints were those of Mark Van Crevel's, police were not prepared to arrest him until they were absolutely sure they were his.
Effectively, you're arresting someone, you're taking away their liberty, and effectively you could put them away for jail for the rest of their life. So it is a serious game that we play, and you've got to be precise in what you do, you've got to be backed up by evidence, you've really got to be very thorough in what you do and methodical.
And so the detectives waited for the opportunity to seize the evidence they needed.
He happened to be drinking from a Coke bottle. He discarded it. Our police were very quick on the spot and very resolute to think about it. Used initiative, grabbed the Coke bottle, and we developed some fingerprints from that Coke bottle.
Within minutes, Mark Van Crevel's fingerprints were ready for comparison.
So the fingerprints found on the Coke bottle were the same that were found on the record of interview, were the same that were found at the crime scenes. They were those of Mark Van Crevel.
Police now made plans to arrest Mark Van Crevel. But those plans could well be thwarted.
He came in and said, "Oh, I want to tell you something, but if I tell you, will it mean I'll be expelled or removed from training?" I said, "Oh, well, Mark, you know, things aren't ever that grim. Depends on what you've done, I suppose."
After 4 months of investigation, police were preparing to arrest Mark Van Crevel. But the 19-year-old, who regularly practiced Taekwondo, had his own plans.
Mark was just one of those students in amongst the whole group. Just a young teenager, I think, when he started. And yeah, just trained like everybody else. He was keen. You know, he'd sweep the floor, he'd bow when he was supposed to bow, and train hard when he was supposed to train hard. He did all the right things. He was a good young boy, there's no doubt about it. On this day, it was business as usual. I was in the office just doing a little bit of paperwork before class started, and Mark came in and was sort of a bit agitated. And I asked him, was there anything wrong? And he kind of just shook his head and said, "Oh, I want to tell you something, but if I tell you, will it mean I'll be expelled or removed from training?" I said, "Oh, well, Mark, you know, things aren't ever that grim. Depends on what you've done, I suppose." I'm pretty sure he said, "You know those murders in the paper? Yeah, well, I did them." You know. So that sort of sent me in a bit of a head spin. I thought, oh, well, maybe he's not telling me the truth, or he's just seeking attention. I was a bit angry, actually. I rang another instructor to come in and take the class. So I thought, oh, best to be safe than sorry. So I just told him to go and get changed. My first priority was to get Mark out of that environment. I mean, if someone says something like that, then there's every possibility it could be true. I was kind of, in my heart, I was hoping it wasn't. You know.
We're going to go for a drive, okay?
I told him we'd go for a drive. So we were going down the expressway because he didn't want to go to the police. That's something he told me straight away. "I don't want to go to the police." He said a lot of stuff, but when he was talking, I know this sounds odd, but I wasn't listening because my mind was going over all the scenarios as quickly as I could about how to get him to the police station. The coffee shop we went to was the closest place I could think of to the police station. So we're having coffee, and I mean, it was a bit of a heated discussion too at times. I mean, I was trying to keep it calm, but I didn't want to fire him up either. But I knew from the martial arts side of training, if I demanded something, then there's a good chance I'd probably get it. So in the end, it was kind of a demand. We're going here, you're doing as you're told. And that was it. And I think that took him a bit by surprise. I was getting quite relieved by then. But then he wanted to visit his unit where he was living. He wanted me to mind a knife and a sword and that. And of course, that then got my mind racing again. I thought, hang on a minute, maybe he's changed his mind. So he went inside and I opened the boot of my car and I stood back probably 200 metres down the road. When he came out, he said, "Oh, I'm not going to hurt you." And I said, "Well, it might not be that way, Mark, but just put him in the car and close the boot." And I said, "I'll be much happier." Then we got into the car and I thought, oh, okay, we're going to go to the police station now, which is really good. So we finally got to the police station and I was starting to get really relieved. We spoke to the young lady at the desk and she asked what we wanted. I said I needed to speak to someone in charge. And she said, what was it concerning? And I said, oh, well, the young man with me, his name's Mark, and he's admitted to 2 murders.
Mark Van Crevel had walked into the Wollongong police station voluntarily. His chilling confession would take all night and last until the early hours of the next morning.
I suppose in your own words, can you tell me what information you have about the death of Mr. O'Hearn?
I don't know anything much about David himself, but I murdered him. I had in my mind that I wanted to kill someone that day. I went to David O'Hearn's house at about 6 o'clock at night, and I walked into his house.
I'll just get Detective Casser just to stand there, and if you can take the place of David O'Hearn for the purposes of this exercise, if I can just get you to stand up, please. And if you can indicate, if Detective Casser is walking away that way, if you can just indicate what you did with him.
Yep. So I walk, bang, hit him on the head, and he slumped down there.
Join me next week for that incredible encounter as we go inside the mine.
They find the box in the basement of a downtown precinct, buried under dust and dead files. On the side, in thick black marker, one line, Chicago 1991, cold case, solved. The question mark bleeds through the tape like a wound. This box says solved. But 34 years later, a city still whispers the same thing. It never was. Chicago. Winter. January 1991. The kind of cold that crawls into bone, that makes the river look like dull metal. Streetlights buzz over empty sidewalks, snow piles against red brick walls, and somewhere in the south side sprawl, a young woman walks alone, breath fogging the air, keys clenched between her fingers. Her name is Angela Brooks, 22, waitress, night school student, second daughter in a family that works too hard and sleeps too little. In less than 1 hour, she will vanish. At 10:37 p.m., Angela clocks out from the diner on West 63rd. Security camera grain catches her tying her scarf, flashing a tired smile to the cook, pushing the door open with one shoulder. Outside, snowflakes fall in slow motion, turning the neon "Open 24 Hours" sign into a blurred halo behind her. She checks her watch, hunches into the wind, and heads toward the bus stop 3 blocks down. It's routine. She has done this walk 100 times. No one studying that tape would guess they are watching the last confirmed images of a missing person. 10 minutes later, the bus pulls up. The driver remembers the empty stop, the unbroken snow. He opens the doors. No one boards. No one steps off. He waits, glances at the schedule, then pulls away. In his mirror, the stop shrinks to a tiny box of metal and glass, swallowed by the storm. Somewhere between the diner and that bus shelter, in 3 ordinary blocks, Angela Brooks simply disappears. The alarm doesn't ring right away. Angela's mother assumes her daughter stayed late at work. The night manager thinks she caught an earlier bus. Friends figure she's cramming for exams. In a city where people work double shifts, a late arrival doesn't scream emergency. Not until dawn breaks gray and bitter, and there is still no sign, no call, no message. Not until 7:12 a.m., when a shaking hand lifts a phone and dials 911. "My daughter didn't come home," a voice says. "Something's wrong. This isn't like her." 2 patrol cars roll toward the Brooks' narrow brick house. Neighbors watch from behind curtains as blue and red lights bounce off snow-coated cars. Officers step out, boots crunching on ice, radios muttering static. Missing adult. Last seen, roughly 10:40 p.m., leaving work. Name, Angela Brooks. No medical issues, no drug history, no record, the kind of profile that draws a certain look between seasoned cops. It isn't said aloud, but it's there. This could be bad. They retrace her steps. Inside the diner, the smell of burnt coffee and grease clings to the air. The night cook wipes his hands on a towel. "She left like always," he says. Said she was tired, said she had a quiz. She was laughing about some guy who tipped her in nickels. Police bag the time card, pull the security tape, jot down quotes. Routine work. They don't know they're gathering the first fragile pieces of a puzzle that will outlive careers. Outside, the weather has turned mean. Wind drills down the street as officers scan the pavement. Footprints crisscross the sidewalks, layered and smeared by hours of traffic. Somewhere there might have been a single track that mattered. Now it's gone. The bus stop is a glass box at the corner, bench dusted with frost. No cameras, no witnesses, just a metal pole, a schedule, and a faint smear on the glass that could be anything. Officers photograph it anyway. On the back of the bench, someone has carved 2 letters with a key. J plus A, lovers, friends, a joke, or nothing at all. But on that first morning, even nothing goes into the report. By midday, the case hits the homicide unit's radar, even though no body has been found and no blood has been seen. It's the combination that does it. The hour, the short walk, the clean background. Angela is not a runaway, not an addict, not someone with enemies or a violent ex. On paper, she is almost ordinary, and that makes her disappearance terrifying. Detective Michael Reyes gets the call just after lunch, styrofoam coffee cooling in his hand. 10 years on the job, Chicago-born, Chicago-raised. Quiet, careful, the guy who reads every line twice. His lieutenant runs through the basics. Young woman, vanished between point A and point B. No one saw a thing. Could be she took off, someone says. Reyes doesn't answer. His eyes are on the falling snow outside the squad room window. Or, he says finally, we've got someone out there who knows how to move in silence. That afternoon, Angela's picture goes up on the board. Smiling face, brown eyes, dark hair pulled back. In the photo, she wears a simple blue blouse and a thin silver cross. Her image is pinned beside a city map. 1 red dot for the diner, 1 for the bus stop. 3 blocks of pavement between them, a straight line through a neighborhood that suddenly feels hostile. The media gets wind of it fast. A reporter hears the radio traffic, makes a call, and by evening the story is on the 6 o'clock news. Mysterious disappearance on the south side, the anchor says, voice grave. Grainy footage of the diner flickers on screen, then a shot of the empty bus shelter, the bench coated in powder. Across the bottom of the screen, 4 words march in bold, missing without a trace. Fear, outrage, whispered theories. Mothers tell their daughters not to walk alone after dark. Co-workers set up carpools. She was just like us, a fellow waitress tells the camera. She clocked out, she went to catch a bus, and she never got there. How do you vanish in a city this crowded, this loud? Reyes walks the route himself, collar up, breath steaming. He notes the broken streetlight near the corner, the boarded-up storefront, the vacant lot with its chain-link fence bent just enough for someone to slip through. He follows that fence, boots crunching through ice. On the far side of the lot, near a cluster of dumpsters, he stops. Something small lies in the slush. A single black leather glove, half buried, fingers stiff from the cold. Women's size. Reyes pulls out a pen, lifts the edge, sees a faint dark smear along the cuff. Dirt. Grease, or something else. He bags it, tags it. One more object, one more question. Back at the Brooks home, the air is thick with voices and TV static. Angela's younger brother stares at the screen where his sister's photo appears between weather and sports. Neighbors fill the tiny living room, offering casseroles, cigarettes, theories. Maybe she met someone, a neighbor says. Maybe she ran off for a while. Angela's mother closes her eyes, fingers pressing into the beads of a worn rosary. My daughter comes home, she whispers. That's what she does. She comes home. Phones at the station ring non-stop. Tips, rumors, ghost stories. Someone claims they saw a woman pushed into a dark sedan 3 blocks away. Someone else swears they heard a scream near the river. Another caller says this is the work of the South Side Stalker, a legend passed between bar stools for years. Every lead is written down, every lead is checked. Most die within hours, but one stands out. A store clerk on 61st Street calls to report something weird. Around 11 p.m., a man came into his corner shop, agitated, asking for change for a 20. His hands shook. He kept glancing out the window like he was making sure no one had followed him. You remember his face? Reyes asks. The clerk nods. Yeah, and the jacket, bright red parka, looked new, too clean for around here, red parka. Man alone, 11 p.m., 2 blocks from Angela's route. It's thin. Almost nothing. But on that first day, almost nothing is better than the heavy silence pressing in from every side. A sketch artist is called. The clerk describes a square jaw, light stubble, mid-30s, dark eyes that flick away from yours. The drawing that emerges is more ghost than man. Still, it goes up on the board beside Angela, another unknown watching over the squad room. By nightfall, the story has shifted from missing person to city on edge. News anchors lean hard on words like chilling and disturbing. Talk radio lights up with callers. Some blame the police, some blame the streets, some blame a world where a woman can vanish while walking 3 blocks in the snow. Hosts talk about a predator at large, about Chicago's latest mystery, about a cold case in the making, even before the first night is over. Day 1 ends with no arrest, no suspect, no body, just a scorch mark where a life used to be. A simple story. A girl leaves work, turns a corner, and never arrives. Because this is Chicago, 1991, a city of concrete and secrets. And this case, labeled years later as solved on the side of that dusty box, is already proving one brutal thing. Sometimes the word solved is just ink on cardboard, hiding the fact that the real answers never came home at all. Day 2 begins before the sun even thinks about rising. The city is still black and blue outside when the squad room lights flicker on, humming over cold desks and half-finished reports. Reyes is back at the board, coffee in one hand, the other tracing that thin red line between the diner and the bus stop. 3 blocks. It looks small on the map. On the streets, it's suddenly the most dangerous distance in Chicago. The search explodes. Officers in heavy coats fan out along alleys and vacant lots, boots punching holes in the crusted snow. Squad cars crawl the side streets with spotlights sweeping over garages, stairwells, back doors left unlocked. A helicopter circles once, its beam carving a white scar through the dark. This isn't a quiet missing persons inquiry anymore. This is a citywide alert. Flyers roll off a precinct copier, hot and smelling of toner. Full cap letters, missing, cold case in the making, one detective mutters under his breath because he's seen this story before. Angela's face is everywhere now, on telephone poles, in grocery store windows, taped to church doors. Her eyes follow you down the block. Someone adds in red pen. Last seen, January 14th, 1991, South Side, call if you know anything. Beneath that, someone else scrawls one word, why? The glove from the lot goes to the lab. It sits in a plastic tray under harsh fluorescent light, while technicians snap on latex gloves of their own. Fibers, trace, blood. They test for everything they can in 1991. Technology is crude by future standards, but it's all they have. Hours pass. When the forms come back, there's one line that hooks every eye. Possible, blood, present. The sample is tiny, too small for anything but a basic type. O negative. It tells Reyes almost nothing. It could be Angela's. It could belong to anyone on that block. Still, the glove isn't just a glove anymore. It's evidence. Leads stack up, then collapse. A cab driver claims he saw a woman matching Angela's description arguing with a man outside a liquor store. Wrong time, wrong street. A teenager swears he found a purse near the rail yard. Wrong color, wrong ID. Tip after tip fizzles, leaving that same gnawing absence. The only concrete thing the detectives have is that nervous guy in the bright red parka, changing a 20 at 11 p.m., 2 blocks off the route. They pull surveillance from every nearby business that has so much as a fake camera screwed into the ceiling. Most tapes are junk, static, glare, the endless loop of customers buying cigarettes and lotto tickets. But then, on a grainy videotape from a pawn shop on 61st, timestamped 10:52 p.m., something catches Reyes' attention. A man in a red parka, hood down, slipping past the front window, head low, hands jammed in his pockets. Just a blur, but the color pops even in bad footage. That shade of bright, almost neon red, a signal flare cutting through black and white snow. Reyes freezes the image, leans in. The face is turned away, no detail, no clean frame. But the timing lines up. Diner at 10:37, the bus due around 10:50. The stranger in the red parka sliding past a shop window at 10:52, just blocks from where a young woman vanished. The sketch from the store clerk comes out of its plastic sleeve again. Reyes pins it next to the still frame from the pawn shop tape. Ghost beside ghost. 2 vague shapes in a sea of static. No jury in the world would call it a match. But detectives don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect pictures. They work with shadows. An all points bulletin goes out. Male, mid-30s, red parka, possible connection to missing female. Squads are told, pull him over if you see that jacket. Ask questions, get a name. Meanwhile, the community burns. Talk shows brand this the South Side Phantom. Headlines scream, young woman vanishes in 3-block walk. Radio hosts say, how safe is your street? People call in with anger boiling in their voices. We are tired of being scared, one woman says. We're tired of cold cases. We're tired of hearing no leads. At the Brooks house, reporters crowd the sidewalk, breath-fogging camera lenses. A microphone pushes toward Angela's mother. Do you think the police are doing enough? She blinks under the lights, eyes red and swollen. Find my daughter, she says. Ask them that. Ask them why she's not home. Inside the squad room, that question hangs heavier than cigarette smoke. On the third night, a break. A patrol car spots a man in a red parka cutting through a parking lot near 59th Street. Hood up, head down. It's after midnight. The lot is empty except for him. The officers pull in fast, blocking his path. One steps out, hand resting near his holster. The other calls out, Sir, can we talk to you a minute? The man freezes. Slowly he turns. Pale face, dark hair, stubble, mid-30s. The sketch on the bulletin board suddenly looks a little less like a ghost and a little more like a real human being. What's going on? He asks. Breath puffing white clouds in the cold. They pat him down. No weapons, just a wallet, lint, and a set of keys. Name, Jason Hall. Occupation, maintenance at an apartment complex. Address, not far. He says he's heading home from a double shift. They ask him if he knows anything about a missing woman. His eyes flicker. No, I saw the news, he says. Terrible, but I don't know her. I don't know anything. He keeps saying it over and over. I don't know anything. They bring him in anyway. Under fluorescent lights, the red parka hangs over the back of a chair in the interview room. Bright as a bruise, cameras roll, tape reels spin on the table, marking time. Reyes sits across from Hall, file open, hands folded. You were on 61st on the night Angela disappeared, he says. We have you on video. Why lie about where you were? Hall swears he's not lying. He says he cuts through that area all the time. It's his route home. The clerk from the corner shop is brought in. He looks at Hall through the glass. That might be him, the clerk says. Looks like him. Same jacket. I think so. Not the solid, sharp ID everyone hopes for. Soft around the edges. Might. Looks like. I think. Still, they press. Why were you so nervous? Reyes asks. I wasn't nervous. The clerk says you were shaking. It was cold. Did you see her, Jason? Did you see Angela Brooks that night? He shakes his head again and again until the motion looks almost mechanical. I don't know her. I didn't touch her. I didn't do anything. His voice cracks on that last word. Anything. They take his clothes. They swab his hands. They search his apartment. The place is small, cramped, unremarkable. A sagging couch, a small TV, a stack of bills on the kitchen table. No trophies, no hidden room, no box under the bed full of dark secrets. Just a tired man's life, ordinary to the point of sad. In the dumpster behind the building, they find trash, old furniture, broken toys. Nothing that links him to Angela. Nothing that screams monster. Only the jacket stands out, that red splash in a case full of gray. Days pass. Snow turns dirty along the roadsides. The flyer on the church door curls at the edges from wind and ice. Vigils are held. Candles flicker in paper cups outside the diner, wax dripping onto the sidewalk where Angela walked. People pray. People shout. People demand answers. Then, 43 days after Angela disappeared, a jogger finds something in a thicket near the Calumet River, a shape partially buried under melting snow and dead leaves. For a moment, he thinks it's a mannequin. Cities breed mannequins in the strangest places. Then he sees hair matted with ice, skin, a hand. By the time detectives arrive, the area is sealed off with yellow tape. The air is wet and raw, the river sliding by like black oil. The body lies curled on its side among reeds and trash, snow mottled with decay, clothing torn, no coat, no scarf, no cross. The face is too damaged by time and weather to be immediately recognizable, but there is a familiarity in the size, the shape, the dark hair. They find a wallet half buried nearby, its leather swollen from weeks of exposure. Inside, smeared but legible, are student ID cards, a bus pass, a photo of two smiling girls leaning over a birthday cake. The name is clear: Angela Brooks. The cold case rumor becomes a homicide headline in a single breath. News flash: missing woman found dead near river. Possible serial predator. City on edge. The anchors deliver every word like a verdict. They talk about a quiet dumping ground, a killer who walks among us, a puzzle of clues and corpses. The autopsy is slow, methodical, brutal. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head. There are marks on her wrists, ligature-like, hinting at restraint. No defensive wounds. No obvious DNA left behind that the early 90s lab can do much with. The pathologist estimates she died the same night she disappeared. Vanished from a bus route, ended by a river. Someone moved her. Someone carried her out of the city's light and left her where the water almost covers everything. Reyes stands over the stainless steel table, the cold in the room cutting through his suit. This is no longer a question mark case. It's murder, and murder needs a suspect. All eyes swivel back to Jason Hall. He is brought in again. Harder this time. No more soft questions. No more help us understand. Now it's, you were there. This is what you did. Tell us why. They show him photos from the riverbank. Cropped, sanitized, but still horrifying. He flinches. He calls it sick. He says whoever did this should rot. Reyes watches him carefully, trying to catch the flicker of a lie, the tiny flinch of recognition that gives predators away. He doesn't see it. Just confusion, fear, anger. But confusion, fear, and anger look a lot like guilt when you want them to. The lab compares fibers from Hall's red parka to the few strands recovered from Angela's clothing. One report comes back with a phrase that feels like a door unlocking. Consistent with. Not match, not unique, just consistent. The same general type, same synthetic blend. The kind of finding that both helps and haunts an investigation. The state's attorney wants more. A weapon, a confession, a smoking gun. They don't have it. They do have public pressure. They do have a young woman dead. They do have a community chanting for justice at candlelight vigils. No more cold cases, the signs say. Find the killer now. Inside the precinct, the word now is heavy. It sits on desks, rides on memos, lingers in the pauses between sentences. Reyes feels it pressing behind his eyes as he stares at the board. Map, photos, glove, river, red jacket, Jason Hall. He can feel a narrative forming the way it sometimes does in big cases, a story that fits into headlines. Maintenance worker snatches woman off street, dumps body by river. It's clean, it's simple, it might even be true, might. Weeks later, under that pressure, under those lights, with detectives circling and the threat of a lifetime behind bars, Hall cracks. Or appears to. He says a few words that change everything. If I was there, if I did anything, I don't remember. It's not a confession, not really. It's a broken sentence from a man frayed at every edge. But pulled into the narrative machine, it mutates. In reports, in summaries, in the minds of people hungry for closure, those words become, he admitted he might have done it. Charges are filed. The phrase, alleged killer, hits the evening news. Angela's photo is shown beside Hall's mugshot. Reporters talk about a quick arrest and a solid suspect. They say the case is well on its way to being resolved. That word again, resolved, solved, done. In the Brooks living room, some of the weight lifts. Not all, it never will. But enough for people to say, at least they got him. Enough for neighbors to go back to late shifts and bus stops. Enough for the city, restless and bruised, to tell itself a comforting headline. Cold case averted, killer caught. But in the quiet of the squad room one night, long after the cameras leave and the chatter dies, Reyes stands alone in front of the board, the line from diner to bus stop, the glove by the dumpster, the red parka caught in a frozen frame, the body by the river, Jason Hall's face. He stares until the shapes blur, until they stop being evidence and start feeling like question marks again. Something won't settle, a timeline that doesn't quite lock, a man whose life doesn't fit the pattern of a practiced predator. Evidence that says consistent with and might be and could have, but never screams this is it. He closes the file anyway, because the machine is moving and he is one detective in a massive grinding system. Years later, someone will write solved on the box that holds this case. Years later, that question mark will bleed through tape and cardboard and time, because even as the city breathes a little easier and the headlines move on, one small, stubborn doubt is already alive in the dark corners of this story, waiting for the day it comes roaring back. They move fast because the cameras are watching. The charge hits the evening news like a thunderclap. Maintenance worker arrested in Southside murder. Jason Hall's mugshot flashes between Angela's senior picture and a shot of the Calumet River, gray and unforgiving. Below a banner, cold case averted. Community relief. In living rooms across Chicago, people nod. Good, they say. They got him. A city that lives on headlines takes this one as fact. Inside the courthouse, it's less clean, less certain. Fluorescent light, waxed floors, a faint smell of paper, sweat, fear. A bailiff calls the room to order. Jason stands in a wrinkled shirt, wrists chained, eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. The prosecutor reads the charge aloud. First-degree murder. The words fall heavy, echoing off wood and stone. Hall says, not guilty, voice catching on the second word like it cuts his throat on the way out. Angela's family sits in the first row, hands knotted together. Her mother clutches that same worn rosary, thumb rubbing the beads raw. Her younger brother stares at Hall like he's trying to burn a hole through him, trying to see the monster everyone says is there. Reporters fill the back benches, notebooks open, pens poised. They're ready to write the story that completes the headline. Arrest to conviction, tragedy to justice, beginning to end. Reyes sits farther back, shoulders tight. This should feel like progress. It doesn't. It feels like watching a train he's not sure is on the right track but can't step in front of anymore. Pre-trial, the machine whirs louder. The state stacks what it has. A nervous store clerk who saw a shaking man in a red parka. A pawnshop video showing a red blur crossing the edge of the frame near the time of the disappearance. Fiber analysis that says consistent with. A vague, beaten-down statement from a suspect under pressure. If I was there, I don't remember. It's not much, but mixed with public outrage, fear, and a victim whose face has been on TV for months, it starts to look like enough. The defense gets the file in a cardboard box of their own. Public defender, overworked, underfunded, too many clients, not enough hours. He meets Jason in a cramped interview room that smells of bleach and old coffee. If you didn't do this, he says, you need to say it and you need to keep saying it. I didn't, Jason answers. I swear on my mother I didn't. His voice is raw. I walk home that way. That's it. I saw the flyers. I saw her face. I felt sick, but I don't know her. I never touched her. The lawyer rubs his temples. He's heard this before from guilty men and innocent ones. They have you near the scene, he says. They have a witness saying you were nervous. They have fibers. They have a community ready to believe you're a monster. They're going to lean hard on that. What about the blood on the glove, Jason asks. That wasn't mine, right? They said it wasn't mine. It wasn't, the lawyer admits. Blood type doesn't match, but they'll say that just means there was someone else in the lot, some random contamination. They don't need every piece to fit. They just need enough pieces to make a picture a jury can live with. Out in the city, the story is simple. A young woman walked 3 blocks and died. A man in a red jacket was there. Police arrested him. Justice, right? People don't talk about the missing pieces. The missing weapon, the missing witnesses who actually saw the abduction, the missing motive. There's no lurid backstory, no festering feud, no obsession spelled out in creepy notebooks. Just proximity and fear and a red coat that stands out in the snow. Trial begins under winter skies again, a year after Angela's walk between diner and bus stop. The courtroom fills early. Reporters flank the aisle, sketch artists stake out good angles, the local TV station sets up outside for live shots. This is the case that shook the South Side last year, the anchor says into the camera. Now the community wants closure. That word again, closure, like it's something you can schedule on a docket. The prosecution opens hard. They project Angela's photo on a screen at the front of the room, larger than life, smiling, young, frozen in a moment before everything turned. The prosecutor talks about innocence, about routines shattered, about a 3-block walk that became a death march. She points at Jason. He was there, she says. He saw her. He took advantage of the dark, the snow, the quiet. He became the predator every woman fears in the back of her mind. They play the pawn shop tape. The footage is bad, but the red parka glows. The prosecutor walks the jury through the timeline, connecting dots that may or may not belong on the same page. Diner at 10:37, bus that leaves with no passenger at 10:50, red-jacketed man walking near the route at 10:52, Angela found by the river weeks later. Coincidence? She asks, voice dripping skepticism. Or opportunity seized. The clerk from the corner store takes the stand. He shifts in his seat, nervous under the courtroom's gaze. He came in for change, the clerk says, nodding toward Hall. He was jumpy, kept looking outside, hands shaking. I remember because it was weird. Is that the man? The prosecutor asks. The clerk hesitates, then nods. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure. Not certain. Not that's him, no doubt. But pretty sure sounds solid enough when said under oath, under arches and seals and the weight of a victim's family watching. It lands like a brick anyway. Then the fibers. An expert in a suit and horn-rimmed glasses stands before charts and diagrams, explaining blends and weaves and chemical compositions. The fibers recovered from the victim's clothing are consistent with the fibers taken from Mr. Hall's jacket, he says. Same type, same general characteristics. Can you say they came from that specific jacket? The defense asks. No, the expert admits. I can say they are consistent with that jacket and others of similar make and material. Others, the lawyer repeats. So thousands of jackets could produce the same fibers. In theory, yes. But the words that stick with the jury are not theory or thousands. They're consistent with. They're same type. They're the idea that threads from that red parka might have ended up on Angela's torn clothes by more than chance. When it's the defense's turn, they try to carve out doubt. They bring up the lack of direct DNA evidence in an era before it's standard. They hammer the absence of any fingerprint tying Jason to Angela or the riverbank. They point out the glove's blood type isn't his. They bring in coworkers who say Jason is quiet, unremarkable, the kind of guy who fixes leaky sinks and broken doorknobs, then goes home to a TV dinner and a beer. They talk about a man's life, small but stable, no history of violence, no stalking behavior, no trail of ex-girlfriends or victims, just a past full of rent receipts and time cards and nothing much else. Reyes takes the stand too. The prosecutor walks him through the investigation like a guided tour. He describes the route, the weather, the discovery of the glove, the riverbank scene. He talks about leads chased down and ruled out. He talks about the red jacket, the pawn shop tape, the nervous man at the counter. When the prosecutor asks if Jason Hall became the primary suspect, he answers yes, because he did. The defense lawyer stands, approaches, eyes sharp. Detective, he says, is there any piece of physical evidence that conclusively proves Mr. Hall abducted and killed Angela Brooks? Reyes pauses. The room holds its breath. He knows what the right answer is for the case. He also knows what the true answer is. No, he says finally, no single piece that conclusively proves he did. But you arrested him anyway. Yes. Why? Because the totality of the circumstances pointed to him, Reyes says. His proximity, the timing, the witnesses, the fibers, everything together. Totality of the circumstances, a phrase that sounds solid but feels slippery when you're the one wearing the cuffs. Hall doesn't testify. The defense worries he'll break on cross, that his anger and confusion will read as menace. So his voice is filtered through others. Lawyers, transcripts of interviews, little fragments. I didn't do it. I don't remember that night exactly. I walk there all the time. The jury never hears him talk about how every day since his arrest has felt like drowning. That's not evidence. That's just a man's private hell. Closing arguments hit like a hammer and a plea. The prosecutor paints a picture sharp enough to slice. A young woman alone on a cold street, a predator in a bright red coat, a sudden attack near a broken streetlight, a struggling body dragged to a car, then to a riverbank. She taps each piece of evidence, each witness, saying words like pattern and logic and responsibility. You can be the ones who stop this from being another cold case, she tells the jury. You can bring justice to Angela Brooks and safety to this community. The defense stands before the same 12 faces and talks about doubt, about what they don't have. No eyewitness to the attack, no DNA tying Jason to Angela's body, no confession, just suspicion and fear and a bright jacket that might have made him visible at exactly the wrong moment. We punish people for what we can prove, not for what we fear, the lawyer says. You were told this city wants closure. It does, but closure built on maybe is not justice. It's a headline, that's all. Then it's out of their hands. The jury goes back to a small room with a coffee pot and a pile of exhibits. Hours drag, the city waits, Angela's family prays. Jason sits in a holding cell, staring at cinder block walls, lips moving silently. In the squad room, detectives pretend to work while glancing at the clock. Reyes stares at the board one last time, every photo, every note, every pinned scrap of a life and a death and a suspect who may or may not be what the file says he is. After 8 hours, the buzzer sounds. We have a verdict. The courtroom fills again, the jury files in. No one looks at Jason, they stare straight ahead, faces set. The clerk reads the verdict aloud, each syllable landing heavy. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. Angela's mother breaks. A sob tears out of her like something physically ripped from her chest. Her son wraps an arm around her, eyes wet, mouth clenched. Reporters bolt for the exit, phones already at their ears. The prosecutor exhales, slow, controlled, like she's letting go of a weight she's carried for a year. Jason's head drops. For a second, he looks like he might fall. The bailiff tightens his grip on the chain between his wrists. Hall whispers something. The nearest person hears it. 2 words. I didn't. But the verdict is louder than any whisper. Reyes feels the verdict like a punch and a question. Relief, because the case has a legal ending now, a line drawn under it, and something else. That small, nagging doubt, again, scratching at the back of his skull. He looks at Jason and doesn't see satisfaction. He doesn't see a predator revealed. He sees a man swallowed by a system that might be right, might be wrong, and will never admit the difference either way. Sentencing is swift. Life, no possibility of parole for decades. The judge speaks about the brutality of the crime, about a life cut short, about a community understandably afraid. He says the city must know that its courts will stand firm against such violence. The words echo under the high ceiling, then vanish. News vans line the steps outside. Cameras stare into the dusk. Tonight a major cold case is closed, the anchor says. The family of Angela Brooks has justice. The South Side can sleep a little easier. They run clips of candles, tears, a prison transport van rolling away under yellow streetlights. The caption at the bottom of the screen reads, Chicago, 1991, case solved. That's what the file eventually says too, in black letters on the tab. Brooks, Angela, homicide, solved. The box is sealed. The board is cleared. New cases crowd in. New tragedies, new names, new headlines. Time moves. The 90s bleed into the 2000s. New mayors, new scandals, new winters. The river keeps sliding past that same stretch of reeds. The diner on 63rd changes owners, then changes again. Neon sign flickers out, is replaced, burns on. The bus route shifts by a block. The bus driver who worked that night retires. The pawn shop closes, its windows boarded, then torn down for a parking lot. In a prison 2 hours outside the city, a man in his 40s with tired eyes and graying hair wakes to the same bars every day. Jason Hall works in the laundry. He reads paperbacks until the pages go soft. He writes letters no one answers. He files appeals that go nowhere. On bad nights, he lies awake and hears one phrase over and over in his head, cold case closed. Like the city put his name over a wound just to make itself feel better. At the Brooks house, the photo on the mantel fades a little more each year. Holidays come and go with an empty chair that never stops being noticed. Angela's mother sometimes tells people she's at peace because they caught the man who did it. Other times, when the house is quiet and the TV is off, she stares at the wall and feels something unsettled inside her chest, a tremor she can't name. Chicago keeps its secrets. New crimes bury old ones. New headlines shove old tragedies down the page. But the past doesn't really die. It sits in basements, in dusty storage rooms, in cardboard boxes with names and dates and labels that say things like solved when the truth is more complicated. And somewhere, 3 decades after a young woman vanished between a diner and a bus stop, science is about to reach back into 1991 with a gloved hand and touch a case everyone thought was over. It will start with one small request. One word spoken in a meeting about backlog and closure. A word that turns solved into a question again. A word that sounds simple but hits like a siren in the quiet halls of old justice. Retest. It starts in a conference room with bad coffee and worse lighting, 3 decades after Angela's last walk through the snow. The city is older, meaner in some ways, softer in others. Buildings have been torn down, rebuilt, renamed. But the files in the basement haven't moved. Dust doesn't care about progress. On a Tuesday afternoon, a captain from Violent Crimes taps a stack of reports with his knuckle and says the words that kick everything loose. We need to clear some of these old homicides. The mayor wants numbers. Media wants feel-good stories. Cold cases. Backlog. You know the drill. We've got new toys now. DNA, genealogy, databases. Time to go ghost hunting. Around the table, detectives shift in their chairs. Some are gray-haired veterans, some are younger, raised on forensic TV shows instead of typewriters. One of them, Detective Aaron Klein, mid-30s, sharp eyes, darker humor, flips through the list. Names, dates, locations. We picking at random? She asks. We start with the ones we stamped solved, but never backed with DNA, the captain says. If we can confirm, we confirm. If we can't, we figure it out as we go. That's how it happens, not because someone wakes up haunted by Angela, not because a witness changes their story in the dead of night, because a city wants cleaner stats and a department wants boxes ticked. They send an email down to Evidence, the place where history lives in plastic and tape. Pull old samples, retest what you can, cross-check with CODIS, see what shakes out. 1 week later, a clerk in a dusty storage bay rolls a cart down a dim hallway. She scans labels, hums to herself, stops at a shelf sagging under the weight of forgotten tragedies. Her flashlight beam skims past robberies, assaults, robberies again. Then it lands on thick black marker, faded but legible. Chicago 1991, cold case, solved. The question mark makes her pause. She pulls the box down, muscles straining, dust bursts into the air, sparkling in the light. She slices the tape, lifts the lid. Inside, photos curled at the edges, evidence bags yellowed but sealed, a case file thick with reports. Something about that question mark bothers her. She shrugs it off. This isn't her mystery. She finds what she needs. A smaller inner box with the word bio scrawled on the top. Swabs, scrapings, the glove from the lot, clothing fragments from the riverbank, triple bagged and labeled with a date that feels like another lifetime, 02-26-91. The samples go up to the new lab on the 5th floor, the sleek one with glass walls and humming machines worth more than entire squad cars. Techs in fresh white coats log them in, barcodes replacing old ink. They talk in low voices about backlogs, budgets, long lunches. For them, this is a job, another tray to process. They weren't alive when Angela walked those 3 blocks. One tech, Malik, holds up a sealed bag with a torn scrap of cloth. Victim's blouse, he reads. Trace collected 1991, attempted serology, limited results. His supervisor nods. Run it anyway. Anything good we get, we push to CODIS, see if the computers can do what the old guys couldn't. She taps the screen, bringing up a new case profile, a new number, the past reborn in pixels. They cut open the old seals carefully, preserving chain of custody like priests handling relics. Small bits of fabric, scrapings from under ruined fingernails, a single hair stuck to the inside of a bag, overlooked or unusable back then. The machines hum, spin, measure. Where 1991 had blood typing and microscopes, 2020 has sequencers and amplification and probabilistic genotyping. Tiny fragments of a dead girl's last hours stop being noise and start becoming code. It takes weeks, these things always do. Cases stack up, machines cycle through unknown after unknown. Outside the lab windows, Chicago slides from cold rain to humid summer, from election season to scandal cycle to whatever comes next. Inside, a closet of old horrors is getting a quiet upgrade. Klein doesn't think much about the Brooks case at first. It's just one name among many on her list. She reads the one-page summary. Young woman abducted, body recovered, suspect arrested and convicted, case marked solved. She sees the note, no DNA available at time of trial. She scribbles a margin comment, retest if possible. Then she moves on to another name, another life. The call from the lab comes in on a Thursday morning when she's halfway through a bad sandwich at her desk. Violent crimes, Klein, she says, not looking up. Detective, this is Malik up in forensics, a voice says. You put in a request on the Brooks case from 91. She sits up. Yeah, what do you have? Something, he says. And the way he says it makes the hairs on her arms rise. We got a partial profile from the victim's blouse. Male DNA not degraded enough to be junk. We pushed it through CODIS. got a hit. A hit. A simple word that can blow open decades. Run it by me again, she says. Whose DNA and where? Stain on the front of the blouse, mixed sample. We pulled a male profile out of it. Comes back to a guy named Robert Kane. Born 65. Chicago address. Prior record burglary in the late 80s, assault in 93, domestic in 95. He's in the system. His DNA was entered after a domestic conviction turned into a felony in 97. CODIS lights up, probability numbers off the chart. Klein clicks through her screen, fingers flying. She pulls the Brooks file digitally, then digs the paper box out from the stack beside her desk. One photo catches her eye, that riverbank, bleak and raw, even in a faded print. You're sure it's not the victim's boyfriend, not contamination? She didn't have a boyfriend listed, and this profile doesn't match any known associates in that file, Malik says. Chain of custody is clean. The swab was sealed since 91, no recorded break. This guy's DNA is on her blouse at some point before she went into that river. I don't see any way around that. And it's not Jason Hall, she says, even though she already knows the answer. Not even close, Malik replies. We ran Hall's print for comparison once we realized what we had. Completely different profile, different blood type, too. The trace blood on the glove back then was O negative. Hall's AB, Kane is O negative. That glove you guys found at the lot, odds are higher now it was his. Klein leans back hard enough that her chair creaks. The office noise fades into a hum. For a moment, she sees it like a split screen. A young woman struggling, a heavy blow, torn fabric in the dark. Then 30 years of dust, then a machine in a glass room whispering a name, Robert Kane. Where is he, she asks. Last known address is somewhere on the west side, Malik says. But you might want to check the other database first. What other database? There's a pause. The one with headstones, he says. Kane died in 2004, overdose in a motel. His DNA was in CODIS before that, but no one reran the old stuff until now. Dead. The word drops like a dull weight. No perp walk, no interview, no confession, no courtroom showdown, just a name and a grave and a city that told itself it had solved this already. Klein hangs up and stares at the name on her screen. Robert Kane. She pulls his old reports. Petty assault, bar fight, a restraining order he violated twice, a girlfriend who said he liked to choke her when he was drunk. It's the kind of history detectives look for when they imagine predators. None of it pointed at Angela back then because none of it connected. The tech wasn't ready. The system wasn't listening. Now it is. She walks the box down the hall to the only man in the building who remembers the case from the inside. He sits at a far desk now, semi-retired but still present, a departmental relic they haven't let go of completely. Hair mostly gone, back a little bent, hands thick with old work. Detective Michael Reyes looks up when she drops the cardboard coffin on his desk. Brooks Angela, she says. You remember? His eyes flick to the faded lettering, then to the question mark on the side. Something in his face tightens. Yeah, he says. You don't forget some names. I was there. I testified. We put Hall away for it. Klein nods. I've been running old evidence through the new lab. DNA, CODIS, the whole deal. They pulled a male profile off her blouse. It hit someone else. Reyes doesn't move. Someone else, he repeats. Robert Kane, she says. Career scumbag. Local. In the system since the late 80s. His blood type matches what was on the glove. His DNA is on her clothing. Hall's isn't. She watches the information land. It doesn't explode. It settles, heavy, as if Reyes has been braced for this impact for years, without knowing exactly when it would come. Where is he? He asks. Dead, she says. Overdose, 2004. No one to question, no one to charge. The old detective lets out a breath that sounds like gravel sliding. He looks down at his hands. 30 years, he murmurs. We put a man in a cage, and the guy whose blood was on the glove was rotting in a motel room. Hall always said he didn't do it, Klein says. Your testimony at trial, you said there was no conclusive evidence, just circumstances and fibers and a nervous witness. You tried to say it. I said it, but I didn't fight it, Reyes answers, voice flat. We had a dead girl, a terrified community, a jacket that glowed on camera. We had a DA office that wanted a headline. I told myself the totality made sense. That doubt was just fear of being wrong. Looks like fear was telling you something, Klein says. He looks up, eyes wet and sharp. So what now? Now, she says, we write a report. We show the lab results to the state's attorney. We put it in front of the Conviction Integrity Unit. We ask them a question they don't like hearing. Did we put the wrong man away for the Brooks murder? And we ask the other one they like even less. If Kane killed her, did he kill anyone else while we were patting ourselves on the back? Down the hall, the news hasn't broken yet. The box is still just a box to everyone else. But in that moment, at Reyes's desk, the word solved peels off the case like a sticker. Underneath is another word, fresh, raw, stinging, unknown. They start digging. Klein pulls everything on Kane. Old addresses, old jobs, old complaints. He floated between neighborhoods, odd jobs, couch surfing, cheap motels. Never stable, never still. In 91, his residence listed is 6 blocks from the diner where Angela clocked out on her last night. No one had cross-referenced that back then. It was another name on another sheet in another file in another system that didn't talk to this one. They re-examined the timeline with Kane inserted instead of Hall, a man with a record for assault, living walking distance from Angela's route, a broken streetlight, a vacant lot, a glove dropped near a dumpster, blood type matching his. Kane's known hangouts line up like pins on the same map that once only had a red line and a face pinned to it. Reyes studies it long after Klein goes home. The old guilt and the new facts grind against each other in his head. Jason Hall's face on the witness stand, Angela's body on cold steel, Robert Kane's name on a toxicology report, 30 years between them and a machine that doesn't care about any of it, only about matching letters and numbers in a genetic code. He goes home late, sits in the dark of his small apartment, and watches the city lights flicker against his window. Somewhere out there, a man has spent half a life behind bars wearing the word killer like a brand. Somewhere under the ground, another man who may actually deserve it lies under dirt and stone, never confronted, never forced to speak. Justice, neat and symmetrical, is nowhere to be found. The next morning, the Brooks box goes upstairs, not downstairs. It's carried up to a different floor, a different kind of room, where prosecutors and review attorneys sit around a table and stare at the past like it might bite. Photocopies of lab reports are passed around, names are read. The phrase, new evidence, appears over and over. No cameras, no headlines, not yet. Just a quiet shift, like something deep under the streets has started to move. A cold case, once stamped solved, is back on the table. And as files open and emails send and meetings are scheduled, a question begins to pulse beneath everything, not printed on a box this time, but beating inside the people touching it. If the wrong man is in prison, then what exactly did we solve in 1991? The first official word is careful, sanitized, and buried halfway down a memo. Preliminary DNA analysis indicates a potential alternate suspect in the Brooks homicide, the line reads. No fireworks, no apology, no mention of a man already serving life, just clinical language, the kind that tries not to admit the ground is shifting under everyone's feet. The Conviction Integrity Unit gathers in a glass-walled room that smells like toner and tension. New generation prosecutors, most of them, raised on wrongful conviction documentaries and exoneration podcasts. They wear smart suits and carry laptops instead of legal pads. Their director, a woman named Pierce with sharp cheekbones and sharper instincts, flips through the Brooks file, pages whispering against each other like ghosts. So, she says, eyes scanning the DNA report, we have a victim's blouse, long-term storage, clean chain of custody, and a male profile that matches Robert Kane, deceased, but does not match the man we convicted. Silence. Then a junior attorney says what everyone is thinking. We might have put the wrong guy away. Might, Pierce repeats. Lawyers love that word. It leaves a door open and a shield up. We don't overturn a conviction on might. We test, we verify, we look for cracks, we see how deep they go. On the other side of that glass, down in the bowels of a state prison, Jason Hall folds laundry in an industrial room that roars with machines. Steam rises off wet sheets, twisting into the air like ghosts. He's older now, lines etched deep around his mouth, hair thinner, eyes dulled by fluorescent years. He's learned how to keep his head down, how to navigate yard politics, how to live with the word murderer hanging over his bunk like a cage within the cage. He doesn't know that his name is on a conference room screen back in Chicago. He doesn't know that a machine has whispered someone else's DNA into a lab tech's ear. He doesn't know that the story of who killed Angela is loosening like old tape on a cardboard box. In the CIU room, they replay the entire case like a film with new commentary. The clerk who said, pretty sure. The fiber expert who said, consistent with, but cannot conclusively determine. The detective who admitted under oath that there was no single proof, only circumstances. The almost confession that wasn't a confession at all, just a broken man under pressure saying, oh, if I was there, I don't remember. Coerced, one attorney asks. Hard to prove, another says. But the optics aren't great. Long interview, no lawyer, vague language twisted into admission. You drop DNA on top of that, this case looks weak from the ground up. Pierce taps the photo of Angela pinned to the inside of the file. We don't forget her in this, she says. If Kane's our guy, we don't just free haul and walk away. We figure out what he did, who else he touched, and why no one saw him in 91. But we start with the man still breathing our air on a life sentence. They assign Klein as liaison. She's young enough to push, old enough to know how the machine fights back when you question its past. She meets with Hall's newest appeal lawyer, a nonprofit attorney who's been filing motions into the void for years, arguing wrongful conviction based on bad identification, weak forensics, and tunnel vision. Until now, every filing has hit the same wall, no new evidence, just rehashed doubt. This time, the lawyer says, eyes shining behind thick glasses, we have something they can't spin away. DNA, male, unknown at the time, now known as someone else. Not my client, not a cousin of my client. A different man with a violent history living near the crime scene in 91. This isn't just doubt, this is a crack down the center of the conviction. Don't oversell, Klein warns. The system doesn't like being told it made a mistake. You push too hard, they dig in. You push smart, maybe they listen. And you? The lawyer asks. You listen. Klein thinks of Reyes's face when he heard the name Kane, the way his shoulders folded for a second, like a man absorbing a hit he'd always expected. I do now, she says. The first move isn't grand, it's paperwork, a petition to test additional items, toothbrush in the old evidence bag, used back then for blood typing, now valuable for a full profile, the inside of Angela's coat, the rope marks on her wrists where skin met restraint, where maybe a fragment of her killer's touch still clings after decades in plastic. The lab ramps up again, machines hum, old horrors become fresh data. Reyes visits the lab this time. He stands behind the glass, hands in his pockets, watching Malik and the others move in a choreography of precision. You guys really pulling ghosts out of rags now? He asks. Malik half smiles. We're trying. Sometimes the ghosts cooperate. What if they do? Reyes says quietly. What if they tell you a story that says we locked up the wrong man? Then we deal with it, Malik answers. Better late than never, right? Reyes doesn't answer. He keeps seeing 1991. Snow, flyers, cameras, a mother's eyes, superimposed over the sterile lab. Back then, truth felt like a straight line. Victim, suspect, trial, verdict. Now it feels like a knot. The first test comes back with a headline no one can read out loud without feeling the air change. The male profile on the blouse matches Kane with a statistical probability so high it might as well be a fingerprint. The second test, from a faint trace on the inside of Angela's coat cuff, echoes the same name. Kane. Hall's DNA, sampled from prison records, is absent from every relevant sample. He might as well have lived on a different planet that night. Pierce calls an emergency meeting with the state's attorney. It's behind closed doors, no cameras, no microphones, just two people and a stack of papers that could start a landslide. We have a problem, she says, dropping the latest lab report on the desk. The state's attorney reads, jaw tightening. We've always known the old cases had gaps, he says slowly. Eyewitnesses, junk science, bad interrogations, but this one was cleared. It's in the books as a win. Then the books are wrong, Pierce replies. No sugar, no spin. If this goes public and it looks like we sat on it, it gets worse. CIU's existence means we admit the system isn't perfect. This is what that looks like. We move now, we control the narrative. We say we found something, and we're fixing it. Fixing it, he repeats, by letting a convicted murderer walk out. By admitting we may have convicted the wrong man, Pierce answers. And by doing everything we can to find out what Kane did in the years we thought we had the right guy. We can't undo 1991. We can decide what 2025 looks like. He stares at Angela's photo for a long time. Finally, he nods. Notify the defense. Schedule an evidentiary hearing. Quietly, no press until we know where this lands. Quiet doesn't last in a city like Chicago. Word leaks the way it always does. An offhand comment in a hallway. A document left open on a desk. Someone with a conscience and a reporter's number in their phone. The story doesn't hit the nightly news yet, but it whispers through legal blogs, advocacy circles, late-night calls between public defenders. Brooks' case might be dirty, they say. Old homicide, new DNA, alternate suspect. Watch this space. In prison, Jason is called to the counselor's office without warning. He assumes it's bad news. It usually is. Another denied appeal, another form to sign, another reminder that the world out there moves without him. He sits in the plastic chair, hands folded, eyes wary. The counselor, a man who's seen too many lost causes to get invested, looks oddly hesitant. You've got a visit, he says. Legal, not your usual guy, someone from the city, conviction integrity unit. Jason's heart stutters. Is this another review that goes nowhere? He asks. Because I've done that for decades. I can't. Jason, the counselor cuts in, and there's something new in his voice. Not hope, not yet, but something like it, buried deep. They want to talk about new evidence in your case. New evidence, 2 words that crack a tiny window in a cell that's been boarded up for 30 years. An hour later, in a small visitation room smelling of disinfectant, Jason sits across from Klein and the nonprofit lawyer. The table between them is scratched, initials carved into the plastic by men who wanted to prove they existed for a second longer than their sentences. We're here about this Brooks case, Klein says. We retested physical evidence using current DNA techniques. Results point to another individual, a man named Robert Kane. His DNA was found on Angela's clothing. Yours was not. Jason stares, lips parted. For a long time, he doesn't blink. The lawyer slides a paper across the table, a copy of the lab summary. He doesn't really read it. His eyes catch on a few words. Profile match not consistent with Hall, Kane. A stranger's name sitting where his has lived for 30 years. What does that mean? He whispers. Say it plain. It means the evidence we have now contradicts the theory that you physically struggled with Angela, Klein says. It means there's a credible alternate suspect whose DNA is on her blouse and coat. It means your conviction is under active review. Active review, he repeats. Does that mean I get to go home? Klein doesn't flinch away from the question. It means we're going back to court, she says. It means we're going to stand in front of a judge and say, the science has changed, the facts have shifted, and the original jury never heard this. It means there is a real chance for the first time that the word guilty gets pulled off your file. Tears prick his eyes, but he doesn't let them fall. 30 years teaches you to hide weakness. And Angela, he asks, what does it mean for her? It means, Klein answers quietly, that the man most likely responsible for what happened to her died without ever facing it. It means the city told her mother a story that might not be true. It means this case was never really solved. He nods, staring at the table scratches until they blur. I used to dream, he says, in the early years, that somebody would come in and say, we got it wrong, we're sorry. After a while you stop. You can't live on that. It eats you. But I never stopped knowing. I never stopped knowing I didn't touch that girl. No one's saying sorry yet, Klein says. The system doesn't do that easily, but we're here. We're looking. That's more than you've had. Back in the city, someone has to tell the Brooks family. Reyes insists on being there. They sit in the same living room he stood in 34 years ago. The furniture is different, the TV bigger, the wallpaper changed, but the air feels the same, dense with absence. Angela's photo still watches from the mantel. Frame replaced, but smile unchanged. Angela's mother is older now, hair white, hands shaking. Her son, middle-aged, stands near the wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. Klein explains the new testing, the new name, the new doubt. She uses words like development and findings and review. Reyes can tell they're not landing. They're just noise. Are you saying, the brother cuts in, voice trembling, that the man who killed my sister might not be the one you put away? We're saying, Klein answers carefully, that the physical evidence points strongly to another man, Robert Kane. He lived near Angela's route. He had a violent history. His DNA is on her blouse and coat. The man in prison, Jason Hall, does not match those samples. The mother clutches the arms of her chair like the room is tilting. You told us, she whispers. You told us they got him. You told us the case was solved. I sat in that courtroom. I watched them take him away. I tried to sleep at night thinking, at least there's justice. Now you come in here and say, maybe not. Reyes leans forward, voice rough. Mrs. Brooks, he says, I was one of the detectives on the case. I believed we had the right man back then, or I convinced myself we did. I'm not asking you to forgive that. I'm not sure I ever will. I'm here because the evidence we have now tells a different story, and you deserve to hear that story from us, not from a headline. The brother's eyes burn. So he walks out and that's it, he snaps. He just gets to go home like nothing, while my sister stays in the ground. No, Klein says. If Hall is released, it won't be like nothing. He's lost 3 decades. There will be a record of what happened. There may be a civil case. There may be apologies, public or private. But none of that changes Angela. None of it brings her back. What we can do is try to get the truth as close as we can to what really happened that night. Right now, the truth we're living with is broken. The mother looks at her daughter's photo. Whoever did it, she says softly. Whoever really did it. He walked free for years while we thought justice was done, while we lit candles and said at least they caught him. How many other girls walked past that man? No one answers, because that's the question that's starting to haunt the hallways upstairs too. Kane lived 13 years after Angela died. 13 years of bars and alleys and locked doors and chances. His file shows arrests, fights, domestic calls. Nothing as big as murder, nothing that stuck long enough to keep him away. If he killed Angela, what else did he do under the city's radar while everyone was pointing at Jason? The Brooks house goes quiet after they leave. Another wound layered over the old one. Justice wasn't just slow, it might have been aimed at the wrong person entirely. The thing everyone was told to believe, the neat ending printed under that 1991 headline, is cracking. In a dusty basement, a box that once read "Solved" now has a new note added to its side in smaller, sharper letters, DNA reopened. Above it, someone drew a tiny question mark that looks like a hook, because the case that gave Chicago a sense of closure 30 years ago is back, and this time, every answer leads to another jagged, open question. By the time the story breaks, it's already too late to control it. One blog post, one anonymous source, one leaked phrase, alternate suspect identified by DNA, and the Brooks case blasts out of the quiet conference rooms and into the bright, merciless glare of public attention. Talk radio revives the name like it never left. Chicago, 1991. Murder, maybe wrongful conviction. The website headlines scream. Cold case solved with the wrong man. Clips from the old trial surface. Grainy footage of Angela's mother crying on the courthouse steps, a younger Reyes walking past cameras, jaw locked. A 20-something Jason Hall in chains, eyes wide, drowning. The anchors, always hungry for a new angle, start using words that sting. Botched, flawed, broken. The city that once said, "Good, they got him," now whispers, "What if they didn't?" In the prison yard, whispers move faster than the wind. Jason hears his own name before the guards come for him. "Hall," someone mutters near the fence. "They talking about your case on the news." A guy at the weight bench says, "Yo, they got some DNA dude, different fool, some Kane guy." Laughter, skepticism. This place is built on rumors. Hope here is a dangerous drug. Then the intercom crackles. "Hall Jason, legal visit." He walks the hallway between blocks like he's walking a tightrope. Every step feels unreal, floaty, like the floor might vanish and drop him back into the same loop. He's been here before. New lawyer, new hearing, new denial. He knows how this movie ends, except this time when he steps into the small attorney room, there's a camera crew outside the chain link barrier. And that's different. Not for him, not yet. They're there for Klein and the nonprofit lawyer who stand at a podium just beyond the prison gates a few minutes earlier, microphones shoved toward their faces. The lawyer delivers the soundbite the city wants. This is not about letting a killer walk. This is about acknowledging the evidence. The DNA tells us someone else was at the center of what happened to Angela Brooks. Our client has said for 30 years he is innocent. For the first time, the science agrees. Inside, separated from that noise by concrete and steel, Klein lays out the next step. "There will be an evidentiary hearing," she says. "Judge, lawyers, the works will present the new DNA results. The state's attorney will respond. The judge will decide whether your conviction stands, gets a new trial, or gets vacated outright." Jason nods, jaw clenched. "You said this Kane guy is dead," he murmurs. "So there's no trial where he sits where I sat, is there?" "No," Klein says. "Not in the way you want. We can connect him on paper, maybe tie him to other cases, maybe build a profile, but he's beyond a jury, beyond a cell." "So the only person who actually gets judged again is me," Jason says. "Even when the evidence points at somebody else, I still gotta stand there and wait to see if they decide to let me breathe outside air." "That's how it works," she says, "for now." The day of the hearing, the courthouse looks like 1991 all over again. Vans with satellite dishes. Reporters in heavy coats doing live shots on the steps. Breaking developments, they say. Shocking revelations in a case the city thought was closed. They roll archival footage next to current images, a split screen of then and now. Inside it smells the same. Wood polish, paper, nerves. The judge is different, older, but the room hasn't changed. Same benches, same rail, same echo. This time Jason enters in a slightly better suit, cuffs removed at the defense table, flanked by the lawyer and a representative from the Innocence Project. His posture is stiff, like he doesn't quite believe he's allowed to sit without iron on his wrists. On the other side, the state's attorney's office sits rigid. No one wants to be the face of a mistake. Pierce is there, expression locked somewhere between resolve and regret. Reyes, in a plain suit, slips into a back row, anonymous to most, a ghost attending his own case. The judge calls it to order. "We're here to consider new evidence relating to the conviction of Jason Hall in the matter of the 1991 homicide of Angela Brooks," he says, voice heavy with the weight of 34 years. "We'll hear from both sides." The lab expert goes first. Malik in a suit instead of a lab coat, hair tied back, voice steady. He walks the judge through it. The preserved fabric, the modern techniques, the clean chain of custody. He explains how they extracted a male profile from the blouse, how it matched Kane's CODIS entry with statistical certainty. He explains that Hall's DNA, tested from prison records, does not appear in any of the samples tied to Angela's body or clothes. "Is there any scientific basis," the judge asks, "to argue that Mr. Hall directly attacked Ms. Brooks based on the physical evidence as we understand it today?" "No, Your Honor," Malik says. "The physical evidence is consistent with the involvement of Robert Kane and inconsistent with the involvement of Jason Hall." Kane's name hangs in the room like a chill. The prosecutor tries to salvage. She mentions secondary transfer, contamination, the possibility that Kane touched Angela in a non-lethal context and someone else finished it. She floats theoreticals like stepping stones over a raging river, but each stone cracks under the numbers, the probabilities, the ugly reality of 30 years of silence. Then Jason's lawyer stands. "When this case was tried in 1992, he says, the jury did not hear about Robert Kane. They didn't hear about his violent background, his proximity to the crime scene, or his blood type matching the glove discarded near where Ms. Brooks was taken. They heard about a red jacket, a nervous man getting change, and consistent with fibers. That is not the same case we're looking at today. The story has changed because the facts have changed." He turns slightly, enough for the cameras to catch his profile. "We can't put Kane on trial. He's gone. What we can do is decide whether we leave an innocent man in a cage to preserve the illusion that we solved this in 1991, or we admit the hardest truth of all, that we may have failed both the victim and the accused." Reyes is called. He walks to the stand like a man wading into cold water he deserves. The oath feels heavier this time. The questions dig deeper. Detective, the defense asks, if you had had this DNA information in 1991, would you have considered Mr. Hall your primary suspect? No, Reyes says, no qualifiers this time, no totality language, just the word flat and final. With Kane's DNA on her clothing and Hall's absent, the investigation would have gone in a different direction. Would you have recommended charges against Mr. Hall? He looks at Jason, sees the younger man he once watched be led away in chains, overlaid with the older one in front of him. I wouldn't have, he says. The room murmurs. That rogue doubt he carried alone for decades is no longer a whisper in a squad room. It's testimony. Arguments end. The judge calls a recess, then disappears into chambers with a stack of files that contain 34 years of weight. Outside, cameras swarm anyone stepping through the doors. On social media, the case trends under hashtags that turn tragedy into shorthand. Hashtag Chicago Cold Case, hashtag Brooks DNA, hashtag Jason Hall. Hours crawl. Reyes finds himself standing alone in a corridor, hand on the cool marble wall. Klein joins him, leaning back beside him, both staring at nothing. You think he walks? She asks. He should, Reyes says. Whether he will, that's on people in robes, not me. And you, she says, you walk out of here clean if he does? He laughs once, bitter. I don't think I walk out of here clean no matter what happens. The bailiff's voice booms down the hallway. All rise. Back in the courtroom, everyone does. Jason's hands grip the edge of the table so hard his knuckles bleach. The judge reads slowly, eyes moving between pages, lips tight. This court has reviewed the new DNA evidence, the prior trial record, and the arguments presented by both parties, he begins. We find that the newly discovered scientific evidence fundamentally undermines confidence in the original verdict. The jury in 1992 did not hear that another man's DNA was present on the victim's clothing. They did not hear that this man lived near the crime scene and had a history consistent with a propensity for violence. In light of this, it would be a miscarriage of justice to allow the conviction to stand as rendered. Jason hears the words but doesn't process them until the judge says the next part, the part that cleaves his life in two. The conviction of Jason Hall in the matter of the death of Angela Brooks is hereby vacated. The state may choose to retry the case. In light of the evidence and the state's representation that it will not pursue a retrial, this court orders Jason Hall released forthwith. Released. Forthwith. Legal words, cold and bureaucratic, but they land like a detonation. The room erupts. Reporters bolt for the doors. Someone gasps. Someone sobs. Someone curses under their breath. Angela's brother stands, torn between rage and something else. Relief, betrayal, neither fits. His mother closes her eyes, lips moving silently. A prayer, a protest, both. Jason doesn't move. He's waiting for the twist, for the however, for the pending this or subject to that. When none comes, when the judge's gavel cracks and everyone starts to shuffle, only then does his grip loosen. His lawyer squeezes his shoulder. You're going home, he murmurs. Today. Later, when the official forms are signed and the system's gears creak through their final rotations, Jason steps out past the prison gates with a plastic bag of belongings and a sky that looks too big. Cameras are there, of course. Microphones. Shouted questions. Do you have anything to say? How do you feel? What do you think of the justice system now? He squints under the pale sunlight. 30 years behind walls makes the open air feel like exposure, not freedom. For a moment, he says nothing. Then, voice ragged, he offers one sentence that plays on every newscast that night. I'm walking out, but part of me never left that cell. The anchors spin it into a narrative. Injustice corrected, system redeemed, cold case finally fixed. Tonight, one says, staring into the camera, a man wrongfully convicted in one of Chicago's most infamous cold cases is free, thanks to modern DNA. The true suspect, Robert Kane, is dead, but the truth has finally caught up. But that's only half true, and truth hates being cut in half. Because in another office, the walls are papered with faces. Unsolved assaults, missing women, bodies found in alleys and lots between 1988 and 2004. Klein and Reyes stand in front of them, Kane's file in one hand, Angela's in the other, a red marker in Reyes's fingers. Slowly, he circles the cases that overlap with Kane's known addresses, his work history, his drinking spots. Circles bloom like bruises across the map. What are we looking at? Klein asks quietly. Maybe nothing, Reyes says. Maybe a drunk who hurt people and escalated once. Or maybe we're looking at 13 years of a predator nobody saw because they thought we already had our monster sitting in a cell. He draws a line from Kane's name to a 1994 Jane Doe found near another stretch of water. Another line to a 1998 missing person whose body never turned up. Another to a woman beaten and left for dead in 93 who survived but never saw her attacker clearly. Patterns start to form like frost on glass, faint but undeniable. A case that once wore the word solved like a badge has now become something else entirely. A doorway, a warning, The first stone pulled from a wall that might not stop crumbling. Angela's story didn't end with a verdict in 1992. It didn't end with a DNA match and a dead suspect. It certainly doesn't end with a man stepping out of prison into a swarm of cameras. In Chicago, 1991 refuses to stay in 1991. It's alive in lab reports, court orders, haunted families, and maps full of unanswered questions. The cold case that the city thought it solved is now colder and sharper than ever, cutting into everything it touches. Because if the wrong man went to prison and the right man died free, and evidence still doesn't tell the whole story, then one terrifying possibility remains, humming under all of it like a low, electric buzz. What if the crime everyone thinks they finally understand still isn't the whole crime at all? You'd think exoneration would be the end of the story. Paperwork signed, man freed, culprit named in the DNA. Case closed, again. That's how the headlines try to frame it. Chicago, 1991. Cold case finally solved, they write now, like the correction erases the original lie. But down in the halls where the fluorescent lights hum too loud and the walls remember every file ever carried past them, nobody feels done. If anything, the air is heavier. The board in the conference room fills up again, this time not with Jason Hall's face, but with Robert Kane's, mugshots from different years. 88, bleary and young after a burglary. 93, eyes meaner after an assault. 99, hollowed out after another domestic. Depending on the angle and the lighting, he looks like three different men. The constant is the stare, flat, assessing, like he's always calculating what he can get away with. Klein prints out a city map, tapes it to the wall. Red dots bloom across it as she marks Kane's known addresses, his jobs, the bars he got thrown out of, the motels he disappeared into when the rest of his life burned down. Rhea stands beside her with the case list, a column of names that never got the word solved written beside them. We start with geography, she says, victims within his orbit. Same general profile, time frame between 88 and 2004. Reyes nods. Women, late teens to early 30s, alone at night, dump sites near water, lots, alleys, anything that feels like Angela. They work in silence, the markers squeaking on paper. A red circle around a 1993 assault in a Southside alley, victim left strangled but alive. Another around a 1994 Jane Doe found near the Calumet, not far from where Angela lay. Another around a 1997 missing woman who never came home from a late shift, last seen near a bar Kane was banned from a year later. Patterns start to emerge. Not clean, not perfect, but suggestive, a ghost of a route only visible from 30 years away. This one, Klein says, tapping the 1993 assault. She survived. Maria Ortiz, age 21 at the time, attacked walking back from a bus stop. Sound familiar? She gave a statement, said the guy came out of nowhere, grabbed her from behind, dragged her between buildings. She blacked out halfway through, face never clear enough for an ID. Reyes scans the old report. Attacker described as white male, medium build, rough voice, that's half the city. But the location, he checks the map, within 3 blocks of a Kane address from that year. Pull her file, Klein says. If she's alive, we talk to her. If she's not, we talk to whoever remembers. They split the list. Phone calls, door knocks, clerks digging through digital archives, and, when those fail, rolling ladders down to shelves that haven't been touched in years. Somewhere behind every incident number is a night that still lives in someone's bones. Maria's alive. They find her in a small apartment above a laundromat. North Side now. The city's geography shifted beneath her feet over the decades. She opens the door halfway, chain still on, eyes wary when she sees badges. You don't live through what she lived through and ever really relax around uniforms again. We're not here about you, Klein says, palms visible. We're here about him, the man who hurt you in 93. That freezes her, the chain slides back. The living room is modest, neat, photos of kids, grandkids, relatives on the walls. Maria moves like someone who has learned how to make herself small in doorways and big in her own space. She sits, but doesn't lean back. You're 30 years late, she says. Her voice is steady, but her hands twist in her lap. We know, Reyes says. Back then your case got filed, but no one tied it to anything bigger. Now, we're looking at a man named Robert Kane. We think he may have been involved in more than anyone realized. We wanted to ask if you remember anything that didn't make it into the original report. Kane, she repeats. The name means nothing to her. I never knew a name. I just knew hands. She swallows. I was coming home from work. Bus dropped me off 2 stops early. I jumped off to grab milk at a corner store, but it was closed. I remember thinking I should have just stayed on. Then someone grabbed me from behind, cloth over my face. Smelled like old smoke and something sweet, like cheap cologne. I heard his voice once. He called me baby. The word comes out like poison. I told the officer all that. They wrote it down. Then, nothing. Years of nothing. Do you remember anything about his face? Klein asks gently. Even an impression, shape, hair, scars? She closes her eyes. Beige, she says. That's what I remember. A beige jacket when I turned my head for a second and saw his arm. Not red, beige. He was white. Dark hair, maybe. I saw his jaw, but it was all a blur. My brain shut off. It's like chewing tinfoil thinking about it. Beige, not red. Reyes files it away. Did he say anything else? He asks. Anything weird? He kept saying, don't fight, what Maria says, but not like he cared, like he was bored, like he'd said it before, like this was just his thing. They show her a photo of Kane, one of the earlier mugshots, closer to 1993. She studies it for a long time. Her brow furrows. Maybe, she says finally. He feels right, but I can't swear. It's been so long. I see that night in flashes, not faces. And if we told you, Klein says, that DNA from another attack, Angela Brooks, 1991, points to this man and not the one we locked up. Maria looks at the photo again, something hard flickering in her eyes. Then I'd say he didn't stop, she says. And you all let him walk around while I learned how to cross every street looking behind me. On the drive back, the car is quiet. Maria's beige, not red, rattles around in the silence. Doesn't fit the Hall narrative, Klein says. We built the whole 1991 thing around that goddamn red parka. But if Kane is our guy, maybe the coat was noise the whole time. Or not noise, Reyes says. What if the big mistake wasn't just picking the wrong man? What if the wrong man was in the right place for the wrong reasons? She glances over. You think Hall was there that night? That he saw something? Did something? We just spent months tearing down his conviction. I don't know what I think, Reyes says. I know he walked that route home. I know that bus didn't pick anybody up. I know we saw him on tape near the scene. Maybe he was the guy who happened to be in every frame without ever touching her. Or maybe... He trails off. Maybe what? Klein presses. Maybe Kane wasn't alone, Reyes says quietly. Maybe there were two men out there that winter, one in beige, one in red, one with a record, one without, one who killed, one who watched or helped or froze. The idea hangs there, ugly and plausible. Accomplices, lookouts, men who hover at the edges and convince themselves they're innocent because their hands aren't the ones swinging the weapon. We have nothing on Hall placing him at the actual abduction, Klein says, and we're the ones who just argued in open court that the evidence doesn't put him there. I'm not saying we drag him back in chains, Reyes says. I'm saying if we're going to slap the word solved on this thing one more time, we have to ask every question, even the ones that make us look worse. Did we miss Kane? Yes. Did we also miss someone else? Maybe. That bothers me. It bothers her too. Enough that later, back at the station, she pulls Hall's old interview tapes. Not the short clips played in court, but the raw footage, hours long, stored on digitized reels labeled with black marker and a date, 02/04/92. The screen flickers. Young Jason appears, eyes sunken, fingers laced, a styrofoam cup untouched in front of him. Detectives, Reyes among them, younger, harder, lean in, ask questions, push, retreat, push again. Walk me through your night, the younger Reyes says on the screen, every minute. I walked home, Jason says, like I always do. Took 61st, cut through the lot behind the shops, that's it. See anyone? A couple people at the bus stop maybe, headlights in the distance, I don't know, it was dark. See her? The photo of Angela is slid across the table. Did you see this girl? Jason stares at the picture, discomfort flickering across his face. I saw her on TV, he says, missing posters. I don't know if I saw her that night. I don't remember faces from one walk. I just walk. Hours in, he starts to fray. If I was there, he mutters at one point, palms pressed to his eyes. If I did anything, I don't remember. Klein pauses the footage there, zooms in on his expression. It's not the slick mask of a predator, not the dead calm of a planner. It's raw panic, like a man who doesn't trust his own memory anymore, but there's something else buried in it. Shame, confusion, a secret he doesn't have words for. She replays another section. You ever see anyone else along that route? Another detective asks. Anyone hanging around, watching? Jason hesitates. On the tape, it's a fraction of a second. Now, slowed down, it stretches. There's always people, he says. Guys outside bars, folks at the corner. I don't know, sometimes there was this guy near the lot. Smoker, leaning on the fence. I didn't talk to him. Did you see him that night? The detective presses. I don't know, Jason says again. I keep telling you, everything feels the same. It's all just walking. The notes from that interview mention possible other male near lot, then shrug it away. No description, no follow-up, because why chase a ghost when you already have a body to hang it on? Klein pulls the record of Kane's 1991 address again. 6 blocks away. A path that takes him right past that lot if he's heading to certain bars, certain shortcuts. A man who smokes too much, according to old arrest reports. A man known to lean on fences halfway between fights. Smell of old smoke and cheap cologne, Maria had said. Beige jacket. Don't fight, don't fight. She closes the laptop, throat tight. They don't have enough to tie Hall to anything but bad timing, but they have more than nothing to suggest Kane was a shadow in those tapes. Unasked about, unnamed, standing just off camera. The deeper they dig into Kane's past, the more odd edges they find. A 1990 report from a liquor store clerk who complained about a guy harassing women out front won't leave. No charges filed. A 1992 bar fight where a witness said Kane got weird when a woman bumped into him, grabbed her arm too hard. Again, no follow-through. And something else, a citation from November 1990, shoplifting, item stolen, one red parka, size large, from a discount clothing rack on 63rd. Red parka. The note chills the room when Klein reads it aloud to Reyes. So whose jacket was it in 1991? She asks. We hung it on Hall because he was wearing one when the patrol picked him up, but 6 months earlier, Kane stole the same kind of coat from the same strip. Did he sell it, lose it, keep it? Did Hall buy his secondhand? Or did we just see red and decide the rest of the picture around it? We built a whole case on a jacket, Reyes says, voice low. Turns out anybody could have worn that color. One shoplifting report buried in a stack of misdemeanors and a lot of assumption. The J+A scratched into the bus bench comes back to him, then a detail they joked about once. Jason plus Angela? Someone had snorted. Creep coincidence. It went into the report as nothing, a lover's graffiti predating the crime. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was a stupid, guilty kid clawing his own initials next to a stranger's as a private dare, a secret he could walk past every day, proof he existed in someone else's story. Or maybe it was nothing. That's the worst part. Every clue could mean everything or nothing at all, and time sandpapers the edges until you can't tell which is which. When the first big expose hits the papers, it doesn't care about nuance. The headline spits fire. Chicago 1991. DNA frees man, exposes possible serial predator, questions still unanswered. The article digs into Kane's history, the failures to connect his violence, the years he walked free while women went missing. It slaps the word systemic over every mistake. Buried in the last third, there's a line about accomplices. Law enforcement sources, speaking on condition of anonymity, say they are exploring whether Robert Kane acted alone or with one or more associates in the 1991 killing of Angela Brooks and possibly other attacks. That's all it takes. The rumor mill revs up, talk shows chew on it. Was there a second man? Did someone else lure Angela from the route? Was the man in red a decoy while the man in beige took her? Did the city free a witness or a collaborator? Jason sees the story on a muted TV in a halfway house weeks after his release. No sound, just his own face in a small box next to the word exonerated, and Kane's mugshot beside the word predator, and a bold, trailing question. Did he act alone? He stares until the screen burns into his eyes. He doesn't hear the host's speculation, the caller's anger, the expert's hedging. He hears only his own sentence from the old tapes, echoing back from 30 years ago. If I was there, if I did anything, I don't remember. Memory is a treacherous thing. It warps, it edits, it protects. Sometimes it hides the worst truths, not from the world, but from the person who lived them. In the squad room, Klein slams the paper down. We never said that, she snaps. We didn't leak that. Now every eye is going to swing back to Hall like a pendulum. Public loves a twist, Reyes says. Hero, villain, villain, victim, swap the labels enough and people start watching like it's a show. But we're not doing this in the comments section. We do it here with what we can prove. So what can we prove, she asks, voice tight. We can prove Kane touched Angela. We can't prove no one else did. We can prove the trial against Hall was a mess. We can't prove he never crossed paths with her. We can prove the red parka was a distraction. We can't prove what it meant. They stand there surrounded by maps and faces and unanswered questions. The word solved nowhere on the board now, not even in pencil. Somewhere in Chicago, 34 years after a girl vanished between a diner and a bus stop, people sit in their living rooms and watch the latest segment on the case. The anchor's voice is grave, cinematic. A cold case once thought solved by the courts, now shaken by DNA. A dead suspect, a freed man, and whispers of a wider pattern of violence still under investigation. Is the city finally closing the book on the Angela Brooks murder, or is this just another chapter in a mystery that refuses to end? The camera cuts to the empty bus stop, now renovated, glass cleaner, streetlight fixed. The bench is new, the old J+A carving is gone. Snow falls in slow motion, just like it did in 1991. The scene looks calm, normal, safe. But if you listen carefully, beneath the hum of traffic and the distant sirens, you can almost hear it. The faint rustle of unsolved things, moving in the dark, waiting for someone to admit that Chicago 1991 cold case solved still isn't a statement. It's a question. They call it a success story. They put uplifting music under the footage. Slow motion shot of Jason stepping through the prison gate, sunlight flaring around him like some cheap symbol of redemption. Vo. After 3 decades behind bars, new DNA results have finally cleared a man wrongfully convicted in one of Chicago's most notorious cold cases. The segment runs between a feel-good feature on shelter dogs and a weather alert. Ratings spike. Viewers nod. Justice, they think. System fixed. Cold case solved. Then they change the channel. But the people inside the story can't. It clings. Jason Hall learns fast that freedom is its own kind of sentence. Reporters camp outside the halfway house. Neighbors either pity him or flinch. Cashiers look twice when he hands over bills, that face sparking a memory from last week's broadcast. Some recognize the mugshot version. Some recognize the man walking out, older, thinner, lined. None of them know what to say, so they say the same thing. Must feel great to be out, huh? As if there's a simple answer to that. He spends his first weeks on the outside, moving like someone who doesn't quite trust solid ground, crossing streets too carefully, jumping at doors slamming, staring too long at small freedoms, a real tree, not one behind razor wire, a night sky without floodlights, a bus stop where no one's watching with a clipboard and a stopwatch. The bus stop. He avoids them at first, walks an extra 10 minutes to a train, pays more, wastes time, anything to stay away from glass shelters and metal benches and streetlights humming over empty sidewalks. But this is Chicago. Eventually, a night comes when the train is down, the taxi app won't load, and a bus is what there is. He stands there in the sodium glow, hands jammed in pockets, feeling 19 and 50 at the same time. Snow drifts in the gutter, dirty and piled, not crisp like that night, but close enough that his lungs seize. The pavement between here and the next corner stretches in his mind, 3 blocks long and 34 years wide. A car slows, headlights wash over him, then keep going. The bus's roar grows in the distance. His pulse races anyway. His brain does what it's done for decades, replays the same fragmented reel. Walking home. Breath fogging. Cold slicing through layers. Neon buzzing above shuttered stores. A fence, a lot. Maybe a shape by the fence, maybe not. Maybe someone smoking, exhale glowing red at the tip. Beige sleeve, dark hair, or is that Maria's memory bleeding into his? Don't fight, baby. That wasn't said to him, but his mind borrows other people's ghosts now. When the bus finally arrives, he almost doesn't get on. For a heartbeat, the empty interior looks like a trap. He forces himself up the steps, drops coins. The driver nods like he's just any other fare. The doors hiss shut. 3 blocks shrink into a blur of kitschy storefronts and new condos and old ghosts pressed into fresh concrete. At the precinct, the board is crowded again. Angela's photo, Kane's mugshot, Maria Ortiz's statement, a line item about that 1990 shoplifting report. Subject stole red parka, size L. The words glow like a warning someone tried to send backwards in time. Klein circles the jacket note in red ink. This, she says, is the thing that keeps tripping me. We built your whole case on the red parka. She nods at Reyes. But 6 months before Angela vanished, Kane boosts the same coat from 2 blocks away. What are the odds? In this city, Reyes says, low enough that we should have seen it, high enough that nobody did. Pierce steps in, arms crossed. We're not reopening Hall's life sentence just to convict him of bad fashion choices, she says. He's out. The DNA cleared him for the homicide. Full stop. No one's talking about dragging him back to court, Klein says. We're talking about a crime scene with 2 men orbiting it, not one. Kane's DNA puts him on Angela. Hall's routine puts him near her route. If we want any honest version of the headline Chicago 1991 cold case solved, we need to know whether those orbits crossed that night, or if the red jacket was just a cosmic joke. Pierce pinches the bridge of her nose. You planning to ask him? I'm planning to try, Klein says. Reyes offers nothing. He just watches the map, the red dots and lines forming a web that feels more and more like a net they all helped weave. They meet Jason in a diner, not an office. Neutral ground. Public, but not too public. 2 p.m., odd hour, empty booths, coffee smell. Grease on the air, just like West 63rd and 91, but softer now, gentrified around the edges. The kind of place that sells avocado toast and calls it comfort food. He's already there when they walk in, shoulders slightly hunched, back to the wall, eyes flicking to every new movement. The nonprofit lawyer sits beside him, protective but not hovering. A waitress drops menus no one will open. Mr. Hall, Klein says, sliding into the opposite booth. Jason, I'm Aaron. We've met briefly. I remember, he says. You're the one who said active review instead of we're sorry. She winces. We don't get that word on our forms. Reyes sits next to her, hands wrapped around a coffee cup that's too hot. Jason studies him, recognition flickering and hardening. I know you, he says. From the tapes they played in the hearing. You were there the first time. I was, Reyes says. No excuses, no softeners. I should have listened to my gut. I didn't. That's on me. Jason looks away. What do you want? We want to ask about that night, Klein says. One more time. Not to blame you, not to trap you, to understand. There's another man in this story now, Kane. We think he's the one who took Angela, who killed her. We know you were near that route. We know you always cut through the lot. We think you might have seen something that didn't make sense then, or that you buried, or that we ignored. You got my statements in a box, he says. You squeezed them out of me for hours back then. I told you what I knew, which was nothing. You told us pieces, Reyes says. You said there was sometimes a guy by the fence, smoker. You said you didn't remember if he was there that night. You said things felt the same. We didn't push on that. We were too focused on you. Jason's fingers tapped the table, a quick nervous rhythm. You want me to remember a face I barely saw in a snowstorm 34 years ago, he says. I don't even remember what I ate last week. Sometimes the mind keeps things you don't want it to, Klein says quietly. Smells, sounds, phrases, patterns. We talked to another woman Kane likely attacked. She remembers him calling her baby, like he was bored. She remembers beige. We're trying to see if your night overlaps with hers in any way. Same voice, same presence. Jason's stare drifts to the diner window out to the street. Snowflakes stick and melt on the glass. The whole city feels like deja vu. I remember being tired, he says, feet hurting, the kind of tired where everything blurs. You walk on autopilot. You know that feeling? He doesn't wait for an answer. Street light by the corner was busted. I remember that. Dark patch always made me speed up there. What about the lot? Reyes asks. The fence, the dumpsters. I remember cutting through, Jason says. Shortcut. Saved me 5 minutes. I remember the crunch of ice under my boots, the smell from the dumpsters. Rot and cold don't mix, they just stack. I remember hearing something. Klein leans in. Something? He taps the table faster. Not a scream, he says. Not like in movies. More like air getting punched out of someone. A kind of ugly grunt, then nothing. Or maybe I imagined that later when you were asking questions. My brain keeps looping your voices over the night until I can't tell what came first. Did you stop? Reyes asks. That's the part I taste when I wake up, Jason says, voice low. No, I didn't. I sped up. I told myself it was a car backfiring or someone slipping or... I don't know. I was a nobody with a crappy job and a cheap jacket. I wasn't about to go play hero in a dark lot. You spend 30 years in a cell for something you didn't do. You get real creative with ways to punish yourself for the thing you didn't do either. The thing you didn't do, Klein repeats. Help, he says. I didn't help. Silence settles. The waitress drops off coffee, retreats. The world outside keeps moving. Do you remember a voice? Klein asks gently. Words, even just one? He closes his eyes, breathes. For a second, the diner peels away. Cold hits his lungs. Darkness. The crunch underfoot. His own heart hammering too loud in his ears. Then faint, threaded through the memory. Something else. Don't, he says. Don't. That's all I caught. Male voice, low, not panicked, just annoyed. I thought it was a couple arguing. You hear plenty of that around there. I kept my eyes on my boots. Don't fight, Maria had said. Like he was bored. The echo hangs between them. Could you pick that voice out of a lineup? Reyes asks. It's a stupid question the second it leaves his mouth. Time doesn't preserve sound like that. Jason opens his eyes, glares. You gonna drag me into another box and play tapes of random guys saying don't until my head explodes? He asks. No, I can't pick it. I can barely pick myself out of my own memories. Klein doesn't apologize. She just nods, filing the detail away. Kane's phrase repeated. Same rhythm, same fatigue. A man for whom violence is routine, not event. There's another thing, she says, hesitating only for a moment. The bench at the bus stop. Someone carved J+A into it. We always assumed lovers' initials, maybe random teenagers. But given everything... Jason laughs, short and sharp. You think I carved my own crime scene signature? He says. Cute. No, not me. I barely had enough guts to look the cashier in the eye when I asked for change. You think I was out there tagging my name like some horror movie villain? So you never carved it, Reyes says. You never met Angela before the missing posters? I saw a girl once at the diner when my buddy dragged me there, he says slowly. Dark hair, tired smile. Could have been her. Could have been a dozen women. She poured coffee, didn't pour it on me, and I left a tip. That's as close as I ever got. If I'd known she'd end up on every bulletin board in the city, maybe I'd have looked longer. But she was just background, like me. They talk a little longer, tiny details. The smell of cheap cologne in the cold, the shadow by the dumpster. How many nights blurred together on that walk? It's all thin, translucent, nothing you can nail to a board and call proof. But it's color, texture, a hint that Kane wasn't operating in an empty city. He was a threat hiding in the everyday noise, and people like Jason walked past him, around him, without names for what they were seeing. When they finally stand to leave, Jason stops them. You really think he did it? He asks. This Kane. You really think he's the one who hit her, who dumped her by that river? Based on the DNA, Klein says. Yeah, I do. And based on the way he hurt other women, Reyes adds. Yeah. Jason nods once. Then I hope he saw her face every night until he died, he says. I hope whatever hole he crawled into in that motel wasn't deep enough to get away from it. Outside, the cold bites. Klein shoves her hands deeper into her pockets. Reyes watches Jason through the diner window for a second. The man sits back down, alone, staring at the empty space where they were. You still think maybe he was more than a bystander? She asks quietly. I think, Reyes says, that at 19, scared and tired, a lot of us walk faster when we hear something we don't want to be involved in. That doesn't make us killers. It makes us human in a way that keeps me up at night. They walk back toward the car. A bus sighs to a stop at the corner, doors hissing open. For a second, the scene overlaps with the grainy footage from 1991 in Reyes's head. Empty shelter, snow, no one boarding. Time doesn't loop, but it rhymes. Upstairs, the map waits. Red circles around Kane's orbit. New notes from Maria. A scribble about cheap cologne. A line. Hall reports hearing don't in lot same night. The board is a storm of threads now, none of them neat. News crews run another segment that night anyway. Graphics sharp and slick. Chicago 1991. Who else knew? They ask. They show the bus stop again. The diner exterior. A stock shot of the Calumet River, black and slow under a gray sky. The voiceover is breathless. Did a convicted man, now freed by DNA, walk past the crime of the century that night? Did he see the killer without knowing it? And if so, what does that say about all of us who move through this city's darkness, eyes forward, ears closed, praying the sound behind us is nothing at all? Questions stacked on the questions. That's what the case has become. Not a clean story of wrong man freed, true killer named. Not a simple headline. Something stickier, messier. A mirror held up to a city that wants cold cases solved but doesn't always like the answers that thaw brings with them. In the basement, the box is still there, tape recut, edges worn. Chicago 1991, cold case. Solved? The question mark bleeds more than ever now. Because with Kane dead, Hall free, and a timeline full of shadows, one brutal truth remains. You can name a killer, you can free a man, you can map every dot on the board, and still, the moment that mattered most, 3 blocks of snow, a broken streetlight, the choice someone made to stop or keep walking, stays locked in the dark, replaying forever in a city that can only reconstruct it, never really know.